This program is brought to you by the Genesis Communications Network, a world leader in talk radio since 1998. Visit GCNlive.com today.
You're in the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
Last week was such a fascinating episode we had with Ray Stanford, where he recalls his encounters with the UFO contactees from the 1950s. It's one of our best episodes yet, neighbors, so if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I suggest you do so. In fact, Ray was so into it that we continued in the After the Paracast podcast, which is part of the Paracast Plus. But I'll tell you, with Ray, we can be flies on the wall, right, Chris?
He's one of the few people that you can really truly say was there and helped design the T-shirt factory. He was there. He met them all. He knew them all. And he's still going strong 50, 60 years later.
And it was so fascinating about all the particular episodes involved there. I know he mentioned one thing which was interesting about Daniel Fry. And the reason we brought it up is because one of our regular posters, Thomas R. Morrison, who has a great knowledge of physics and does a podcast with a physicist, as a matter of fact, I'm told, he was suggesting that Daniel Fry had real scientific knowledge about what has become current edge science in a lot of areas. And Ray kind of dismissed it offhand. And then Thomas has been posting lengthy messages in our forums. So take a look at it at forum.theparacast.com. Lengthy messages where he explains where Dan Fry had it right on. So what I did is I sent a note to Thomas and said, come on the show and tell us about this. And he will in the very near future. He has kind of a weird work schedule, he tells me, but we'll make it happen. So Thomas R. Morrison will be coming on the show. Next week, we'll have Stan Gordon. And the following week, we'll talk with a gentleman who's, by the way, an investigator with MUFON and has something called the World UFO Watch. And his name is Bob Sparing. So he's going to come on in 2 weeks. We'll hear from Alan Greenfield and a lot of other fascinating things. But today we've got a really interesting gentleman who's going to tell us why everything we know is wrong. Is that right, Paul Eno?
Well, as far as I know, yes. Based on a lot of experiences that I had early on in the early 70s and that my son Ben, who was obviously considerably younger than I am, has also agreed with it. And that's the idea that our paradigm, our way of understanding things is really very narrow. And you'd think that logically any intelligent person would realize that we're too narrow in our interpretations of just about everything. And you really can't see the whole universe from our own perspective. For example, the assumption in the field that I started in when I was studying for the priesthood of all things was ghost research. And the assumption was these are spirits of the dead. There is some sort of material world, of course, that we can see, and some sort of material world that we can experience other than through sight usually, and that this is pretty much the way it is, sort of the 19th century spiritualist approach. But the very first case, and subsequent cases certainly that I engaged in, 70 to 72, those ideas weren't good enough. I was seeing things that just were not explained by that narrow paradigm. And later on, when I was running into people seeing ghosts of themselves, or people seeing buildings that were there one day and gone the next, things of this kind, that were relatively well attested by other witnesses, you're dealing with far more than the typical ghost understanding of spirits and all this business. So that was sort of a beginning of this idea that everything you know is wrong. And we include ourselves in that, Gene. I mean, it's not like somebody asked me if do you know everything? And I said, well, I really don't know. So, I mean, it's just, it could be circular reasoning, and it's the first day of school really for all of us. In the UFO realm, everyone assumed, and in many ways still does, that you're dealing with nuts and bolts craft from other planets, piloted by visitors from there. And
if only
sure,
it was so simple.
precisely. And some of these, it may very well be true, but there are issues with how to get here, as we all know. However, in the 1970s, when I was totally confused, at the end of the 70s, when I had encountered a case in Maine of a young girl who was a student at the University of Connecticut, and at the same time was haunting a house in Maine. It's really quite dramatic what occurred. She encountered the people who lived in the house, and they were screaming and all this, and they finally, I wormed the whole story out of everybody. And again, something that really just nudged me over the edge into a conclusion that we really are all wrong, or at least not good enough in our narrow paradigm, and began to look at what other possibilities could be occurring here. Why do people see ghosts in clothing? Why did I stand with 6 other people as witnesses in a lost village, so-called, an abandoned village all overgrown with woods in Connecticut in 1971, and everything but see an ox cart go by with a team driver yelling, a whip cracking, and hoofbeats, but we couldn't see it, about 20 to 25 feet away. So these are all questions that led to a sort of love affair with quantum mechanics. Now, my degree is in philosophy and academic background in theology, so this is the farthest thing you can get from quantum mechanics, or is it?
This is very interesting when you're talking, Paul, referring to this way. It so much meets with what we're hearing from a lot of people we've talked to on the Paracast recently, and quantum mechanics has been dropped in at least 3 or 4 recent cases that it has something to do with what's going on.
Sure. Well, there are 2 physicists, well-known, who are famous enough not to have to worry about tenure and grants so that they can agree with us. Dr. Fred Alan Wolf and Dr. Amit Goswami. And they don't agree totally, but I mean, they're very, very close to what we say. And when they've been on our show, they've maybe, just sort of come pretty close to our own interpretation. But again, we say, well, we didn't learn this in the classroom. Between Ben and myself, we've been sitting in the paranormal trenches for a combined period of almost 60 years. This explains things far better. Instead of spirits of the dead, we may have overwashes, intersects, and overlaps of parallel realities where the guy never died, okay, is still alive. This goes to the root of everything that we are, the way we understand even things in our daily lives. We frequently are asked, okay, well, I lost a loved one. How do I deal with this? Especially when they know you've been in the seminary, they think you have some kind of pastoral ability, which may or may not be true.
Well, you go on the computer, use your password, and it opens the door. That's how it works.
Yeah. And then if there's a case, people having trouble in their house, they want you to go in and fix it, as if they're not even involved. So these are all things that are deepened by a sort of new understanding of the paranormal. We don't even use the term died. It has no meaning in a world where in a multiverse, if I may use the term, which essentially includes every single possibility. This is a current theory in quantum mechanics. Everything that possibly could exist does exist somewhere or somewhen, and where all time is simultaneous, as Einstein essentially proved with his book Relativity in 1952. So when my mother translated, as we say, it's a very ancient term, people wrote in and a very, very I suppose in a nice way, said we're very sympathetic.
Paul, go ahead.
Okay.
Paul, we're going to break in about 50 seconds. Go ahead, please.
Okay. And essentially they said, well, how do you deal with the loss, with your mother, Ben's grandmother? I said, well, it's not that she's still with us, but that we're still with her in many, many worlds where she never died, because it's really many versions of ourselves. It's all us, and it's one great big unity. So I have a better relationship with her now than I did before she translated. So that's our point of view on that.
Well, that's interesting because multiverse has become a common theme in fiction. Even the comic book superhero shows now will depict different versions of Earth with counterparts to a specific character. There's a version of that character on each Earth, or a slightly altered version. And once you reach, of course, the comic books and the superheroes, it becomes part of mass market and the mass culture. Very
Sure.
fascinating. I have an interesting theory I'll drop at you, Paul Eno, in our next segment. With Gene and Chris, you're in
The Paracast.
We also have swag. We have all these exclusive Paracast things that you can buy. We've got 60 or so different items, and entails t-shirts, sleeves for notebook computers, iPad cases, mouse pads, the Paracast jumbo tote bag, all sorts of t-shirts and jackets and stuff like that for men and women. We have a Paracast aluminum water bottle. All this stuff, you go to store.theparacast.com, store.theparacast.com. What makes it special is that the items are the best quality, great t-shirts, fabrics, and they have our official logo on them. That's what makes them special, in multiple sizes and colors. We even have stuff for children, stuff for women, stuff for men. We have all sorts of sizes, like small up to X large. A lot of good stuff. That's the swag from the Paracast. You go to store.theparacast.com, stop by, and take a shopping tour.
What would your life be like if you woke up each morning with new vitality, feeling better than you have in years, and you noticed a difference in your sleeping patterns, blood sugar levels, and had a sense of well-being overall? There's something that is changing thousands of people's lives, and you could be one of them. It's called Heart and Body Extract. Sharon Harris, co-creator of Heart and Body Extract, talks about the positive effects of Heart and Body Extract.
What happens with the formula Heart and Body Extract is it's giving the body the necessary vitamins, minerals, amino acids, enzymes, and phytonutrients so the body will heal itself. And yes, the body does have the ability to balance blood pressure, balance cholesterol, clean and unclog the arteries. It can also work on balancing the circulation for diabetics. So the body is an amazing thing. It simply needs some help so it has the tools to heal itself.
Heart and Body Extract gets results. To order your 2-month supply, call now, toll free at 866-295-5305. Order online at hbextract.com.
By now you know that wireless technology like cell phones do in fact pose dangers to the health and privacy of everyone. Block-It Pocket's wide range of products are unmatched in providing the protection you deserve. No scare tactics, just common sense. BlockItPocket.com offers quality American-made options to alleviate and eliminate these invisible dangers. Learn more at BlockItPocket.com or call 888-315-9618. BlockItPocket.com, enhancing health and privacy.
It's been said, any society is only 3 missed meals away from chaos. Those times may be near. Think about it. Our country faces multiple terrorist threats and aggressions from Russia and North Korea. Social unrest and violent marches yet again may lead to looting of stores and city shutdowns. And our crumbling infrastructure leaves our power grid vulnerable to long-term outages from a single cyber attack. When the chaos from any one of these threats arises, the government knows it can't provide during a widespread national emergency. That's why you need your own plan for self-reliance. That's where My Patriot Supply comes in. Get a 4-week survival food supply for only $99. That includes breakfast, lunches, and dinners. Order online at preparewithgcn.com. $99 for 4 weeks of survival food that tastes like homemade cooking and lasts up to 25 years. From My Patriot Supply. Get your kits today at preparewithgcn.com. Free shipping is included. Preparewithgcn.com.
Do you know what's lurking in your water? More than 200 contaminants could be sitting there, just waiting for your glass. With a ProPure water filter, start enjoying clean and great-tasting water today. ProPure filters, independently tested, latest water filter technology. ProPure systems do not require electricity and are easy to set up and easy to use. To find out more, visit your authorized ProPure dealer or ProPureUSA.com. That's ProPureUSA.com.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
Now, Chris, someone was suggesting in our forums, before I nuked the thread, that you're sounding too deep and guttural, and I was suggesting maybe we should give you helium.
Well, it just comes out the way it comes out. I always thought that it was it's a fluid, sort of malleable thing. It depends on my instantaneous mood. I can say it like this.
Well, now he's just being possessed.
That's scary. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's scary. Okay. Paul, so the suggestion here is that your mother still is alive in another version of Earth, perhaps.
Many others.
Many versions. And so if you try to get in touch with her, she might answer. I had a wacky theory, too, and of course there's no way to prove this, or the proof would be something that would be rather drastic. That is, when you die, you don't physically stop existing in your own mind. You are just living in a different universe where you're still alive. It doesn't mean you stop getting old or anything. But maybe there's a version of Gene Steinberg or Chris O'Brien that died at 23 or 37, yes. But we go on in the next universe and it doesn't matter to us.
Well, I think that's quite plausible, Gene, actually. As a matter of fact, that's pretty much how we put it ourselves. We use the metaphor of the tree, okay? The tree has thousands of leaves and one falls off. That's not you. You're the whole tree, okay? And really, when you get down to it, we're kind of the whole tree. But getting past the narrowness is really the tough part. Now, when I was in the seminary and doing graduate work in psychology, I was working in psychiatric hospitals, more specifically state hospitals. They weren't all psych patients, but many of them were. And this was all hush-hush, of course, was to work with the diocesan exorcist, the priest, because when you'd be in a room with a patient, the doctors would be there diagnosed with some sort of psychosis, but stuff's flying off shelves on the other side of the room, or the guy's floating out of the bed. Obviously, this is more than psychosis, all right? So that's the reason we were there, and there were a number of exorcisms. But I just began to wonder, is this really demons, and is it really the sort of the classic theological answer to this problem that we thought it was? And or in that house in 1974 with Ed and Lorraine Warren in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the refrigerator's floating off the floor. I'm standing there with 3 police officers and 3 firefighters, and we all saw this, and it's in their reports. Is this the spirit or the demon, picking the thing up? I thought there have got to be better explanations. Now, if I may, I can give you a perfect example of the narrowness of our paradigm and why maybe everything we think we know was wrong. This was in Ogdensburg State Hospital, upstate New York, 1970, I believe it was early 75. There was a hallway in one of the wards, and the staff didn't like to work there at night, and it was considered that there was something fluky in this hallway. Haunted isn't the word they use, but it was implied. And it was a functioning ward. There were patients, and one of the patients, when I got there, claimed she was a psychic medium. And she said, I'm sure she was, and she said that what was happening was that there was a man who presumably had died, who was waiting there for his wife, who was also a patient, and he was going to take her home. The implication being that he was dead, she was going to die, and he was going to take her home. Now, aside from my idea that if you're dead, you're dead. You're not going to be doing anything, right? Which is why I don't believe death really exists. So I said, okay, I'm going to find out about this. It took me a long time to talk about this because it sounds like I'm doing the psychic medium thing, and that's not a good idea necessarily. And so be that as it may, the chapel was in that particular hallway. So I disappeared in there for the better part of my stint at the hospital for the next 3 days. And the staff figured, well, he's a seminary student. He must be praying or something. What I was actually doing, putting myself in a meditative state, you open the mind. At the same time, you're very careful. I dealt with enough, well, we call them parasites up to this point. Folklore calls them demons, to kind of know when they might be around and you want to stay away. To make a long story short, you do occasionally connect with someone or something that is either neutral or not bad, at least, or maybe even human, from what I was already beginning to believe were parallel realities. There was a man waiting to take his wife home, but he was in the railroad station across the St. Lawrence River in Prescott, Ontario, Canada, and he was waiting for the train to come in from Montreal, and he was going to take his wife home to their house. This is what I got from him. In the parallel world in which he existed, and physicists who believe this will say the laws of physics very often are very different from world to world, even if they might look alike. And in this particular world, the laws of physics were such that people could talk to and he used the word neighbors. And it took me a minute to think what he was saying, but he was talking about me. People from other close parallel realities, they considered them neighbors, and it was not unusual to talk to them. You know, had I been doing that in the halls of the seminary, I probably would have ended up in that ward. Today, pockets full of antipsychotic drugs, but this was normal in their particular world. This psychic medium was picking this up, didn't know any other way to interpret it other than this was a dead guy waiting for his wife to die, because that was the only part of the narrow paradigm that could explain what she was feeling. And she might very well have picked up this guy, but did not have a paradigm in which he could be a living guy and all this stuff. It had to be this narrow spiritualist thing. So that's an example of how we may be just misinterpreting these things all these years. And I could have been wrong, but it seemed very clear to me. So again, I'm just suggesting new ways to approach this.
Now, just to follow that, I suppose that some people who were put into mental institutions, they're seeing this reality and another reality, and sometimes it's difficult to decide which is which. You're maybe living in two different worlds at the same time. Maybe, and that might exist to a lesser degree where people totally remember things differently. They went through the same experience, but it was totally different, and there's no way to reconcile it. And again, we say, well, that's because human memory is not perfect. Maybe it's the fact that reality is not a solid thing, even when we think it is. In this universe, we almost always see a little spillover.
Well, with a nod, Gene, to the fact that we have to be careful. We have to keep our feet on the ground. We have to live in the world we're given. But at the same time, I think you really put it very well. I think that we've got, it's often today called the Mandela effect. Okay. Now, sure, especially as we age, I mean, there's the possibility for confabulation and false memories and this sort of thing. But are they false memories? Why is it that Mozart was able to write brilliant piano concerti starting at the age of 4? Probably because he was aware of where he already is. Don't even use the past tense. Where he already is a brilliant composer somewhere and someone else, and that's how that occurred. In the same way, I think that we have memories of things that are happening to us in parallel lives, and I think one of the terms we use is déjà vu, perhaps. And other times, sure, there can be chemical imbalances in the physical brain that mess you up that way, memories and this sort of thing. I'll give you an example.
Before we have the example, let me break. We'll have some examples, fascinating information here from Paul Eno about a reality that might be many realities, and what happens if you get a taste of more than one. With Gene and Chris, what will Chris do this time with the stinger? You're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
Water is the single most important thing your body needs, so you want to be sure it's the best for you and your family. Since 2005, thousands have depended on Berkey purified water. The Berkey Guy provides the lowest priced filtration systems in every size. For incredibly delicious water now and in an emergency, get to GoBerkey.com or call 877-886-3653. 877-886-3653. GoBerkey.com.
You may own a knife, but if it's not an indie hammered knife, it's not a knife. From the forge to the grinder to the sheath, each indie hammered knife is handcrafted using God-given talent. The result is the sharpest edge a knife can have and a true work of art. See a variety of knives and the complete knife kit at ihknives.com. Indie hammered knives, custom knives, made in America.
Hey, diabetics. Yeah, you. Got a spare hour to waste going to the pharmacy to get your insulin or other meds and supplies every month? I didn't think so. Me either. I've got life going on, which is why I use PillPack. PillPack is an amazing online pharmacy. They package up all my diabetic meds and testing supplies into daily doses and send it to me every month, automatically. All I do is pay my normal copay. PillPack does the rest. I'm serious. This is a free service. They don't even charge for shipping. PillPack handles all the medical insurance stuff and even get with my doctors for my other prescriptions so I don't have to, which is good because that's the stuff I forget. But PillPack remembers everything. They even package up my daily vitamins so I remember to take them too. If you're diabetic, your meds and supplies are life and death, which means you need PillPack. Call right now for this free service. You may even qualify for $25 in free vitamins. 800-560-7310. That's 800-560-7310. Again, 800-560-7310.
Hi, my name's John Kunkel. I'm 63 years of age. I watched several YouTube videos of Stephen Hewers and learned what supplements might help me with energy and weight loss. I've now been on the Andreas Black Cumin Seed Oil, Synergy One, 6 other products from Synergistic Nutrition for several weeks now. I've lost 10 pounds. My joint pain has been reduced significantly. I have a lot of energy that I've never had before. My cravings for sweets are gone, and I'm rarely hungry. Even my cravings for foods like hamburgers and heavy carbohydrate meals are now gone. This is the only thing that's worked for me. I was seriously considering bariatric surgery, but that's out the window now. Thank you so much, Synergistic Nutrition.
With Synergistic Nutrition, we help you take the guesswork out of supplementation and help you hit the bullseye of success. I encourage you to get specific about your health needs because when you do, your body will celebrate with energy and well-being. Call Synergistic Nutrition today at 888-988-3325 or visit oneworldway.com. That's oneworld.com.
Hi, Peter Vaccaro for ParanormalDate.com. Are you looking for love in all the wrong places? Now you have a chance to change that by signing up for free at ParanormalDate.com. This incredible dating site puts people of like minds together. People who are interested in the strange, the unusual, mysteries, ghosts, UFOs, and the afterlife, and so much more. ParanormalDate.com was developed for you, people seeking a viable alternative to the other dating services. You can join for free by going to ParanormalDate.com, and if you decide you like it and want to connect with people, use the code GEORGE for a substantial discount. Mark Rawlings, president of ParanormalDate.com, says so many people hunger to share their experiences about the paranormal, the unexplainable, or the afterlife, and so much more, and this is the source for them to meet and share that common interest. So sign up for free at ParanormalDate.com, ParanormalDate.com, and use the code GEORGE if you decide to connect with someone you like.
This is Jacques Vallée. You're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Paul Eno joining us, and he, of course, is telling us why everything we know is wrong, and he does a radio show called Behind the Paranormal at WOON in Rhode Island. Paul.
All right, Gene. Well, I was going to give an example or two of memories that may or may not be true or that may reflect parallel lives that are going on. Going back to Ogdensburg State Hospital, which is mercifully closed at this point, there was one particular day in 1975 that was really, really bizarre because everywhere I turned, some strange things were going on. And this is going to sound like a joke, but I assure you this happened. One of the doctors said to me, Paul, you have to meet this guy. It said, did you ever hear the jokes about a guy who thinks he's Napoleon? I said, well, this particular patient really does think he's Napoleon. So I said, okay, I'll go meet the fellow, a very old man who's in his 80s, and he was more or less bedridden, and he was in a room with several other elderly men, none of whom said a word. And I asked this man, I said, okay, well, I understand that you have memories of being Napoleon, and he engaged in a 45-minute, one of the most brilliant monologues I've ever heard, lectures, as it were, the history of Napoleon, Borodino, Waterloo, the whole thing. And it was though he was there. It was really quite striking. And the knowing look in his eyes was really amazing. At the end of the conversation, I said, well, how did you find out you were Napoleon? He said, God told me. And the man in the next bed, who I didn't even see his face, he was lying there like a lump, rolled over and said, I did not. So I said, and I didn't talk to the guy about why he thought he was God or whatever, but I just left it. I was kind of having a laugh inside. But this man who thought he was Napoleon, it was like if he wasn't Napoleon, then I don't know who he was, because it was really quite amazing. Now, I've addressed groups of psychiatrists on this subject, the possibilities of going beyond our normal understanding of schizophrenia. When people are hearing voices and all this sort of thing, when they're listening publicly, the steam comes out of the ears and their eyes turn red. However, a number of them inevitably come up at the end in private, and they will say, I've often suspected the same thing, that these people are experiencing real worlds that we just don't see or don't know about. But if I said that, I'd lose my job. So in science and in medicine, there is plenty of politics, and you have to be very careful. And the disciplined thinking required by science is very important. Peer review and this sort of thing. But there are elements of politics and things of this kind that don't let you go beyond a certain point in most cases, unless, as I say, you're so famous that doesn't make any difference, as with the two physicists who more or less agree with us. So again, I think we're looking at an entirely new paradigm. I think everything we knew previously is wrong, or at least not good enough. That can apply to history, theology, our knowledge of ourselves, our knowledge of the universe. And it's really, as I say, the first day of school, and we don't really know anything for sure. Stan Friedman and Kathy Martin wrote an excellent book called Science Was Wrong, and they pointed out things that were accepted by everybody, particularly scientists, and later turned out to be wrong, so that we have to have enough humility to realize that everything we know may be wrong, or, as I say, at least not adequate.
Well, there you go there. But I do think there were a few points where they said that science was wrong, like on global warming, where science appears to be right, but then we're not going to get into that kind of argument because we get into the political realms.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about stuff that was.
Now, thing that's always bothering me about UFO and paranormal research is so many people just stick with the old paradigms. So, flying saucers or spaceships, abductions involved contacts with UFO entities, ghosts or spirits of the dead. They don't speculate. Most of the discussion is not on what it would be or what it could be. It is on what happened. Well, this case occurred here, and this house is haunted, and this sighting occurred there, and what did cause the Roswell crash? Sometimes you get really tired of it. I know years ago, an old friend of mine who published a UFO magazine said, I'm tired of these sightings. This was like 1966. There's a guy named Jim Moseley, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good old
I never knew him, but yeah.
I worked for him. He was one of my first jobs that I had. Was working full-time for Jim Moseley. This is 1965 at $5 an hour.
Not bad.
And that was a lot of money in 1965. To show you how much money, right now it would be like $38 or $39 an hour.
Sure.
In today's money. So, I missed the thing there. If I just kept a job with that salary, unchanged, and just got cost of living increases all these years. But it's the thing that bothers me about all these UFO organizations. They collect sightings, but we don't get into what you and I and Chris are doing and what you've been doing so well in this episode, which is let's find out what's really going on. Let's look for answers.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to realize that some UFOs may be craft from other planets, okay, whatever that may mean. But I think maybe the distinction is that instead of just traveling here in the normal way, they may use the multiverse to travel. When you think of time travel, and it's funny, I know a scientist who is working on time travel concepts, and he said, you have a point. He was talking to Ben and myself, and he said, you don't travel back and forth in time, you travel sideways. Now, isn't that an interesting way to put it? Because if the whole thing is simultaneous, and there you go. In the same way, you could be on one planet, and if you had the knowledge, and you don't necessarily even need machinery. Shamans will tell you they do this all the time. You could move from one place to another without really even moving, if you just knew which boundary to cross, where it was, and how to control it, and this sort of thing. And this could be why Ben and I, who have been specializing for the last 12 years in researching what we call flap areas of seemingly unrelated paranormal phenomena that are relatively constant, but that we believe are related because of the intersect points and the overwashes of these various worlds. And I think that they being the government or someone like the government is very interested in this, because wouldn't we love to weaponize the paranormal, make it to appear to an enemy that we can manipulate time and space by moving around through these boundaries. And every single time, when we're working on 5 different places right now, including Rendlesham Forest in England, where nobody thought to talk to the local people about what's still going on there, that you've got the military in one capacity or another showing up. Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania Triangle that we've just started last year in western Pennsylvania. Now just starting another one, the Leominster State Forest area in Massachusetts, the area of around Woodville, Texas, centered at an airport. I mean, I could go on, but there's always a military component in there somewhere, and strange things start to happen. So I think that we're not the only ones who are saying this, and as you say, Gene, more and more guests are looking at it this way. But it doesn't mean that it's not nuts and bolts craft in every single case, but I think they may be using the multiverse in one way or another, perhaps even to travel. But if you talk to people like Ted Phillips from Missouri, a very, very long-standing UFO researcher who has tremendous database of physical evidence of landings, he'll tell you that in the past 15 to 20 years, the nature of UFOs, at least as he sees it, and it's reported to him, it seems to be changing from the nuts and bolts kind of craft to more ethereal light balls, he calls them. We might call them orbs and all this business. And this is where you get into a lot of the crossover phenomena that Ben and I are interested in. People see these orbs in photographs, particularly digital photographs. Aha! Spirits. However, if you see them outside and there's a funny being standing underneath, aha, a UFO. Maybe our entire paradigm is narrowed further by the fact that we label things according not only to our own paradigm, but according to the way in which we experience it. The context in which the phenomenon is experienced may have a lot to do with how we label it. That in itself can be misleading.
With Gene, Chris, and Paul Eno, you're in the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
Neighbors, I want to tell you about my favorite graphics app. It's the award-winning Graphic Converter. You know, Graphic Converter is the universal genius for photo editing on your Mac. Join over 1.5 million loyal users for this Swiss Army knife photo editing app. It gives you all you expect from a top-flight image editing app with tons of features, and most important, it's easy to use. It's also far less expensive than that other app that you can only get by subscription. You know the one I'm talking about. What's more, you can get 20% off with your order right now. So write this down to learn about Graphic Converter. Go to www.lemkesoft.de/Gene. Let me spell that. www.lemkesoft.de/Gene.
This is Dan Pilla. Do you owe the IRS money you can't pay? Are tax debts crippling you? I've defended people from the IRS for over 30 years. I've helped thousands, and I can help you too. I wrote the book on IRS settlement, and I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a hopeless case. Call 800-34-NO-TAX to finally get free of IRS debt. With the IRS's new programs, there's never been a better time to solve your problem. Call 800-34-NO-TAX. That's 800-34-NO-TAX, or my website, danpilla.com.
In these uncertain times, it makes sense to have a sustainable backup method to cook food and boil water. If your current plan includes using a fuel-burning stove or cooking over an open fire, then there's a much better way. The Minuteman Rocket Stove is a biomass-burning cooking stove that only requires small quantities of sticks and twigs for fuel. The Minuteman Stove is easy to use, smokeless, portable, powerful, and sustainable. For the finest in survival cooking stoves and fire starters made right here in the USA, go to MinutemanStove.com. That's MinutemanStove.com.
It's called the Deep State. Barack Obama's most loyal aides still hold office, and they want to stop President Trump. Deep State was first revealed in the runaway New York Times bestseller, Big Agenda. David Horowitz's Big Agenda exposes Obama's government in exile and his shocking plan. Newsmax, Lou Dobbs, and Coulter all say you must read Big Agenda at bookstores everywhere, or check out our free offer. Call 800-NEWSMAX, 800-NEWSMAX, or go to bigagenda411.com. That's bigagenda411.com.
Are you happy washing your hands with harsh chemicals? Are you happy doing laundry with detergents? Are you happy paying high prices? Find your happiness with Pure Soap. These all-natural, earth-friendly Pure Soaps are the very best you've ever used. Buy in bulk. Get a 12, 36, or 48-month supply, or get items individually and still save big. You're getting soap products twice as good as what you're using now, earth-friendly and natural soaps. Your family deserves the best. Happiness is 5starsoap.com. Why not put your money up the drain for a change? See them at 5starsoap.com or call 1-800-340-7091 for a catalog. Cal Ben Soap Company can save you thousands of dollars and give you good old-fashioned real soaps that are triple concentrated. Soaps made from vegetable and coconut oils. See their full selection of soaps at 5starsoap.com. That's F-I-V-E starsoap.com. Or call 1-800-340-7091 for a catalog.
Being self-reliant is about being prepared and to do what you need to have your own source of renewable energy. Portable Solar LLC offers the most powerful EMP-hardened solar system on the market that is transportable from place to place, and the best part, it's very affordable. Contact them at portablesolarllc.com or call for details at 972-575-8875. Soul Arc EMP-hardened solar generator energy insurance for your family or business. Call Portable Solar LLC today or go to portablesolarllc.com to check out their patent-pending technology.
Hi, this is Bryce Abel. I'm the producer of Dark Skies, the co-author of AD After Disclosure, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
I am readying the helium for Chris, by the way. The only thing is, the only people who do that, of course, regularly are people like Howard Stern. And I think that stopped being funny like 40 years ago, so we will not do the helium. Although I think certain people who speculate in this field would be better off with helium. But let's do some real stuff here. Paul?
Okay, well, we just had a book come out, Ben and I. It's the first one we've written together. And we go into this epistemology, how we think we know what we know, in one of the early chapters, Science and the Paranormal. One point that should be made along the lines of everything you know is wrong is that, how do we know really anything? And the basis of Western thought really was René Descartes, who built his whole system of epistemology and mathematics on the idea that je pense donc je suis, I think, therefore I am, or I must exist. But it's interesting, a lot of people don't realize, at least as reportedly on his deathbed, he said even that's not good enough. And, of course, nobody covers that. But the idea has a lot of flaws in it logically. How do we know our thoughts are coming from ourselves? Is it the island theory, something Ben and I disagree with, that everything we are is contained within our bodies? Those are all things you have to believe to accept the idea that I think, therefore I am. And people say, well, math doesn't lie. Well, I mean, what do you mean math doesn't lie? I mean, well, 2 plus 2 was always 4. Well, no, it isn't. In the base 2 mathematical system, 2 plus 2 equals 2. So everything really depends on our point of view, how you approach it, and how broad-minded you are about it. And I think the paranormal is a perfect example of how narrow we are and why we need to go, first day of school and do the best we can together.
I think that's a pretty good piece of advice. I wanted to add something about René Descartes, you just happened to mention, who, of course, is one of the founders of the Western, kind of the philosophic and actually scientific traditions.
Sure.
He was a young infantryman hired by the Spanish crown and was part of the army that was sent to subjugate the King of Bohemia. As a young man, of course, he wanted to go out and see the world, and he was an aspiring mercenary. And after they went ahead and subjugated Bohemia, the army was marching back to Spain, and he had a very interesting dream several nights out on the march back from Bohemia. And according to Descartes, an angel came to him in a dream and told him a secret. about nature. He said, the angel said, the secret of nature is by measure and number. That was really where you can trace back the underpinnings of the age of reason and actually the beginning of the scientific age, if you will.
No, I think that's true. But I think the difference between the Western mind, founded on which he was a major influence, and the Eastern mind, as reflected in not necessarily even Greek thought, because that was the origin of the Western mind, but in some Muslim thought and some Zoroastrianism is the basis of most modern religious beliefs, including the immortality of the soul. And we have a whole chapter on that too, as a matter of fact. The idea is that I think where it went wrong was that in the Western mind, and really in the modern mind, universally, you take things apart in order to understand them. In the Eastern mind, traditionally, and this goes to the Far East as well as the Middle East, you put things together in order to understand them. I think this is a critical point in approaching perhaps a broader understanding of the paranormal. Even the modern investigative techniques when it comes to the quote-unquote ghost phenomena, involving engineers' tools such as the electromagnetic field meter and all this, but you take things apart and you don't put them together. There is a certain belief that I'm at least suspect that very often when they're on these ghost hunts, something I discourage, by the way, and the temperature is manipulated by the quote-unquote spirit, that the investigator may actually be influencing the environment in that way. So these are all things that are not considered generally in modern quote-unquote paranormal investigation, which is based on this idea that you take everything apart. So
not only does the West have a habit of taking things apart, they have a habit of taking them out, bashing them, and breaking them into the smallest pieces that they can.
That's right.
and then,
yes.
And then start measuring.
That's true. So it is a matter of point of view, but I think you get farther if you look at the whole, if you have a holistic approach. And I think we're starting to realize that in the West. I think we're starting to realize it in medicine, that the human body isn't necessarily just this machine. You poke around like a car mechanic until you see if you can fix something. But it's a holistic approach. It's the attitude, the psychology, the diet, everything you put in and everything that's in there already. And I think that same kind of approach to the paranormal is paved by the idea of the multiverse. Even physical health, I think, can be affected by multiverse ideas that bring a great unity with a capital U in the spirit of the most ancient peoples, Ubuntu, the African notion of the very ancient African notion of justice and freedom and unity, that everything we do affects one another. For this book, too, we did a lot, for a previous one, did a lot of research with the Australian Aborigines and with some of the more ancient peoples. I didn't actually go to the Indian Ocean, but I knew people who had, and I was the Nicobar and Andaman Islanders of that area have an unbroken tradition that goes back between 30 and 50,000 years, unbroken. The San and Khoisan Bushmen in Africa, their DNA goes right back to the bottleneck that occurred about 150,000 years ago when the human race almost ceased to exist. Their traditions are just, millennia after millennium after millennium after millennium. And it's just, these are people to whom we should listen. And they have ideas about these things that are very much in line with what quantum physics has discovered, or thinks it's discovered, as far as multiverses and even the nature of deity, our own sharing in that. It's really amazing. It has universal applications for history, theology, self-understanding, psychology, and again, the perfect example of having brought it all together. And these were our most remote ancestors. It's really, again, the first day of school, and hence the idea everything we know is wrong, or as I say, at least not good enough.
Is it a matter then of maybe rediscovering, having gone down a path that just isn't working in terms of reflecting our reality, and now we kind of have to go back and figure out what we knew before and bring it up to date?
Gene, I think that's exactly right. The question is, how do we do that and have it be effective? In other words, you have a lot of people today who read a few books on shamanism, say. They set themselves up as shamans. Maybe they'll go camping or take what they think is a
they
vision.
move to Sedona.
They moved to Sedona.
Or Asheville, and then set themselves up as shaman.
Sedona, the only place I've ever been where you get idle conversation on the street and inevitably turns to the paranormal. It's great. So you have to walk the walk, as pardon the cliche, and not just talk the talk. Any real shaman will tell you that you really have to grow up in it. You have to become part of the culture. And really, ideally, even if you were to learn a new language, ideally, you become part of the culture, because then you will begin to understand the language. There's a funny saying in Quebec. I spent a lot of time in Quebec, Canada, General Quebec in particular, many years ago. And there's a saying, qu'est-ce qu'il mange en hiver? What does it eat in the winter? And there's this, what the hey does that mean? Well, you have to have been in Quebec and experienced some of their culture, and you know how the winter affects life there, and it's just an old saying like what is that thing? How does it survive in the winter? Explain it to me. And qu'est-ce qu'il mange en hiver? But unless you're familiar with the culture there and the lives of the people, then that part of the language might not mean anything to you. So, in the same thing, how much more so when it comes to understanding the human spirit or the experiences of the paranormal that we have. If our own remote ancestors had not experienced what they believed were supernatural beings, or experienced questions they couldn't answer, things that needed explanation, we wouldn't have religion or science really today. And whatever it was they were experiencing, maybe they didn't understand it, but religion or science, what is the mother of religion and science? Really, it's the paranormal, the unknown, the unexplained. That's the mother, really, of science and religion, which, by the way, have not been at odds very often over the period of even of Western history, only now with fundamentalism.
Which is really stunning when you think about it.
Oh, yeah, they were almost one and the same, for centuries. I mean, the whole Galileo thing is often pointed, I don't mean to wander here, but the whole Galileo thing is often pointed to as an example of the narrow-minded conventions of the Roman Catholic Church and everything else. And yeah, there are plenty of narrow-minded conventions there. But in this case, he was not condemned. It was political, 90% political, and he was grudgingly respected by the Vatican as a scientist. So there's a lot of...
there's a difference between house arrest and decapitation or the rack.
Well, sure, exactly. So,
well, we're going to break now before they decapitate us, the network. With Gene and Chris, you're in...
The Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Classic science fiction at its best, available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
Lifetime Grazed 100% grass-fed beef has the health benefits you seek. When compared to conventional beef, it offers good fats while virtually eliminating the bad. That's the result of cattle who never eat grain, ever. Rich in antioxidants, including vitamin E, C, beta-carotene, and CLA. No artificial hormones, antibiotics, or other drugs. For all our fresh, non-cooked products with only 100% grass-fed beef, go to MidasResources.com. Use voucher code GCN to get 30% off your order. MidasResources.com or find us on Facebook.
Hunters, anglers, campers, and survivalists. Get back to nature. Expand your horizons with the highest quality, most versatile, unique slingshots and sling bows on the market at slingbow.com. Sling bow products are compact and models start from just $17.98. They're perfect for your bug out bag or storing in your vehicle. Give yourself and your loved ones the excitement and tradition of sling bow. A new frontier in archery and truly modern twist on this primitive survival tool. Feel the thrill only at slingbow.com.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
We have Paul Eno. We're learning why everything we know is wrong.
I have a question, Paul. You said in order to inhabit the role, you kind of have to be brought up in it. Like speaking about shaman, who are generally raised in a tradition by their grandfather or grandmother, in the case of a girl. It generally skips a generation, and it starts early on, prepubescent, and then continues on throughout the person's lifetime until they become the head of whatever lineage it is, or a practitioner of the lineage. And since I want to be a techno shaman, I guess I got to go out and learn HTML a little better.
Don't we all? Well, people often ask Ben that if he's with me on a show, and they'll say, well, how did you get like you are, or whatever? How'd you get into this field? And he refers to himself as my spawn, that he grew up with me and listened to every lecture ever, all this business. But really more deeply, Ben studied under a shaman who is a full-blooded Aztec, and comes from generations of shamans. So it's really kind of, I suppose you could say, in his DNA. He lived here in Rhode Island, and Ben was able to go see him and do some work with him. And to this, Ben still doesn't call himself a shaman. And people sometimes refer to me as a theologian. I mean, that's not true. I mean, I studied it formally and all this stuff, but the theologian implies a certain amount of even sanctity that I am far from. In the same way, shaman, that term implies a lot more than just having studied it. It's lived it. So we transfer this over to what we call multiverse awareness. How do you take what the principles are that we think we might be seeing in paranormal research coming from the multiverse, multiple parallel realities, multiple versions of ourselves, seeing what you think is a ghost and it's actually somebody going about their day, or communicating with someone or something from that sort of parallel realities, various parallel realities.
Question here, which just hit me as I was talking to you. We're talking about counterparts to us in different universes. What happens if the two meet?
Oh, that happens relatively frequently, I think.
Okay, so there's another one of me possibly roaming around loose. There's another Chris, another you, but not just in Earth 38, but right here.
Possibly. We often have people write to us, to our show and say, I walked into the kitchen and, for example, there I was sitting at the island in the middle of the kitchen reading the paper. So people see ghosts of themselves, as it were. Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating thing. With the whole multiverse idea, as far as meeting yourself is concerned or affecting your own future, I think that is tempered by the idea that everything is simultaneous. The old time conundrum, you go back and you shoot your own grandfather with a time machine or something, and you shoot your grandfather. How could you be born? Well, that doesn't seem to be how it works. Every time you make a choice or a decision or something happens, you've essentially created a branch of this universal tree, another universe. And as far as running into yourself right here, yeah, that's entirely possible. There's the old saying, everybody has a double. But the question is, what is the nature of the consciousness? What is the nature of the connection? What is the nature of the unity? I think that when we have various memories, or when we have precognitive dreams, things of this kind, we may very well be sharing a world with ourselves. We can be our own guardian angels. The folklore about angels and things of this kind may not be just folklore. They may not necessarily be servants of God who will help you in your life. They may be other versions of yourself from worlds where you can, as this guy in that version of Ontario said, you can talk to your neighbors, and maybe you can help versions of yourself. I find this a lot with ancestors, something you don't hear very often in the West, that there's a real connection between certainly all people, but between other versions of ourselves and other versions of our own ancestors and loved ones and relatives. And it really is quite elegant and quite complete. I don't know how else to put that. But as far as running into physical versions of ourselves here, yeah, I hear that.
When someone sees something that might happen in the future, so you have a so-called psychic reading, are they just looking into another universe and seeing what's happening to that counterpart of you?
I think that's probably true. And again, because of the simultaneity of consciousness and what we call past, what we call future, it's all simultaneous. I think that's relatively easily done. The question is, how do they interpret it? The fly in the ointment here, Gene and Chris, are what we call the parasites. Okay, and we have a lot of material on this too. And for example, that poltergeist case in '74 with the Warrens, and I'm watching this refrigerator float. There were a lot of other things that happened that were very negative. And I think what we're dealing with are not demons. I mean, I think they fill the bill, but that's how we, in our narrow paradigm, approach it. Servants of Satan trying to wreck your life and all. They seem to be, on the other hand, life forms of several different species who will feed between worlds. And that's the critical thing. They seem to be able to move between worlds. Ben and I have found them feeding on several different events in several different worlds at the same time. I'm thinking of a case in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, outside Philadelphia in 2004, where there was something going on in sharing the same space, something very negative, like a shooting. And the thing was feeding on that. And then it was going in, when it couldn't get enough there, it would go into the house and bother two girls who shared this apartment. And they believed they were being haunted by several other people who they interpreted as ghosts, but were actually living in a third parallel reality and were being fed upon by this parasite. It gets really tangled, but it's still pretty fascinating. And I think this is what it is. How do they move between these worlds? Well, life is very tenacious, and it's everywhere and every when. The whole biology of the at the bottom of the sea, by the volcanic vents, sulfur dioxide actually creating an environment that an entirely different ecosystem can live on than the one that is the biology is fed by the sun as ours is. When we thought, this is one of the areas science was wrong, that all life has to be based on the sun. Even now, we go to other planets and we look for life, as we know it. We look for conditions in this. Well, what about life as we don't know it? Well, these parasites seem to be examples of life as we don't know it. And they feed upon, for the lack of a better term, energy that divides. I can't put any better finger on it than that. But you see them everywhere in the history of the paranormal. For example, the Bell Witch case, 1817 to 1821 in Tennessee, very well publicized. The American Haunting, the film The American Haunting with Donald Sutherland and Sissy Spacek was based on that case. A lot of books. But I think what a lot of people don't consider is that there was a lot more going on in this area than just this girl being picked on by what appeared to be a poltergeist. I think there were as many, and I was an unofficial consultant on that film. We were going to do a separate production, a featurette on it. So I was given some documents. And what was the basis of this? Well, there seemed to be child sexual abuse going on in this family. And popularly, it was considered that John Bell was the father, was attacked by the poltergeist, eventually killed by it. I don't think that was the case. The girl was also being fed upon by this. But I think when you look at what this thing was doing, it would attract as much attention as possible and feed on as many people as possible. It became so powerful from the attention it was getting from the neighbors and from the family that it was able to leave the house. I should say I think there were about 6 of these things. Leave the house and give people agricultural advice, send them on wild goose chase treasure hunts, do all sorts of things that are generally not reported. Now, I think what was happening was that, and this was one of the questions people would ask it: who are you, what are you, and where did you come from? Well, the 6 of them seem to betray a fascinating trait I've seen among parasites, and that's that the longer they spend attached to a human host or any host in a parallel world other than their own, the more they tend to forget their own origins. It's utterly fascinating.
What's fascinating is to listen to these announcements. The book and the radio show are called Behind the Paranormal. Everything you know is wrong, from Paul and Ben Eno. And Gene and Chris probably agreeing you're in the Paracast.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Classic science fiction at its best, available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
It's been said, any society is only 3 missed meals away from chaos. Those times may be near. Think about it. Our country faces multiple terrorist threats and aggressions from Russia and North Korea. Social unrest and violent marches yet again may lead to looting of stores and city shutdowns. And our crumbling infrastructure leaves our power grid vulnerable to long-term outages from a single cyber attack. When the chaos from any one of these threats arises, the government knows it can't provide during a widespread national emergency. That's why you need your own plan for self-reliance. That's where My Patriot Supply comes in. Get a 4-week survival food supply for only $99. That includes breakfast, lunches, and dinners. Order online at preparewithgcn.com. $99 for 4 weeks of survival food that tastes like homemade cooking and lasts up to 25 years. From My Patriot Supply. Get your kits today at preparewithgcn.com. Free shipping is included. Preparewithgcn.com.
This is Dan Pilla. Do you owe the IRS money you can't pay? Are tax debts crippling you? I've defended people from the IRS for over 30 years. I've helped thousands, and I can help you too. I wrote the book on IRS settlement, and I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a hopeless case. Call 800-34-NO-TAX to finally get free of IRS debt. With the IRS's new programs, there's never been a better time to solve your problem. Call 800-34-NO-TAX. That's 800-34-NO-TAX, or my website, danpilla.com.
When a storm causes power loss for a whole day, it can seem endless. There's a new kind of storm brewing, one that could target our nation's power grid and turn off the power for not just days, but for months or longer. Veteran news anchor Ted Koppel's new book, Lights Out, details this exact scenario. And CENTCOM General Lloyd Austin says it's not a question of if, but when. That's why Americans are rushing to secure solar-powered generators to provide an endless supply of life-saving electricity without gas, fumes, or noise. And the breakthrough Patriot Power Generator 1500 has it all. Portable and lightweight, providing up to 1,500 continuous watts of clean, quiet, and free renewable solar power. If a blackout strikes, you'll have power for heat, lights, cell phones, and computers, and critical medical devices, all from the rechargeable solar power. Our first introduction sold out fast, and with high demand, we can't guarantee keeping the supply in stock. Stay protected with the power you need. The Patriot Power Generator 1500. Right now, enjoy our special easy pay option. Just go to blackout27.com. That's blackout27.com. Blackout27.com.
Are you looking to become more self-sufficient? Then you need to have your own energy source. The Solark EMP hardened generator is automatic, maintenance-free, and reduces your monthly electric bill. You can also take it off-grid when you go camping. Contact PortableSolarLLC.com or call for details at 972-575-8875 today. Portable Solar LLC gives you everything you need to start using solar energy in less than 1 hour. Solark EMP hardened solar generator energy insurance for your family or business. Call Portable Solar LLC today.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gray Alien Report, and you're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Last few days, we've had an interesting phenomenon going on, and that is with Skype. Suddenly, I can't hear the people at the other end of the call. It's not my hearing going, it is Skype losing its mind. Going into another universe. Now, here's an interesting thing that comes to me, Paul Eno, when we talk about the multiverse and the interactions between our universe and another universe. You always look in the sci-fi stories about people going from one universe to another. You see kind of like a watery mist, kind of like Stargate. you see the water and you go into the water, this little gate or something, and you end up in another place. So is there a way, do we think, if I wanted to go to Earth 17, I could just go? Or do I will myself to Earth 17? Like they did in the movie Somewhere in Time, where Christopher Reeve wills himself back in time?
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's possible, but I think moving from one world to another or jumping from one world to another is, I don't think it's quite that clear cut. We refer to world families, okay? In other words, when you get up and you think of them, even physicists will talk about them as almost bubbles or like soap suds. What's the term? Space-time foam, they'll sometimes call it, separated by membranes or brains, BRANES. And we seem to not just live in one of these. We seem to pass through perhaps millions in a day. But the world family concept is that suppose you get up and you have your morning routine. In the case of, we're all guys, so we may probably shave and all this business, and do that with a relatively a steady routine. But when we put the razor down, we've essentially passed into another universe, okay? But the thing is that our consciousness, probably the consciousness of the entire biosphere, keep those worlds pretty much in order. So that if you want to disrupt them, we'd pretty much have to all do it together. You could do it yourself, with the proper kind of, I suppose, shamanistic training or mindset or whatever. But it's essentially moving the world through the world family in an orderly way that we pretty much determine. And when you have disruptions in that, you're being jostled by another world family, some of which, the ones that are closest to us probably are not all that different, but some are. Hence, we were jostled in that house in Bridgeport, Connecticut in 1974 by what, if we'd known at the time to look for, perhaps very, very disrupted electromagnetic fields or a number of other factors that we were jostled by a world or passed through by a world in which the laws of physics were very different, hence the refrigerator floated. And you have things, playing Frisbee with your fine china. These are not part of our normal world families. They're a disruption of the order that we, perhaps as a biosphere, maintain. So consciousness is everything here. And to be able to move, I think, well, maybe you play the piano better than I do, Gene. Or maybe, Chris, you have an ability like that, only it's an ability to move more easily between brains, through brains, BRANES, this kind of thing, as we see in many, many worlds. It depends on physics. The laws of physics. In our particular world, one of the things that made me question the old spirit ghost idea was that the laws of physics here are really not conducive to the entirety of a being being maintained without a body, physical body. That doesn't add up. Hence another idea that maybe you're dealing with parallel universes instead of a spirit thing. That's a long answer to a short question, but I think it's kind of yes and no. Yes, you can do that. You can move among worlds, and you do. But can you move, I think what you're really asking, Gene, to a very different world, say on another planet or into a world where you're married to somebody else, this kind of thing. And yeah, that can be done. But here's the problem. We are at a point in our evolution where we might not really be up to that. A good example is probably the wildest thing I'll be able to say on the show today. And that's that when I was talking to shaman in Australia and in Quebec. One was, of course, an Aboriginal elder in Australia. The other was a Cree elder, shaman in Quebec. Both told me that when they were kids, a shaman they knew had brought people back from the dead. Not resurrection, not reincarnation, actually brought people back from the dead by passing through a world boundary to a world where these people had not died. In the case of the guy in Quebec, he was the young father of a family. In Australia, he was a kid. And they literally grabbed them by the arm, pulled them back across the membrane, and there they were.
How would they like that? What if they have their own lives in that other universe? Isn't it kind of disruptive to say, okay, we're finding your existence in Earth 7, let's take it back to Earth 1?
Yes, that's pretty much what happened. And it was not a good idea. They realized it wasn't a good idea, according to, again, this is 30 years, secondhand, third-hand information that I got. But they said the families had been totally distraught at the deaths of these two people and had offered them lots of money and all kinds of stuff. And they just sort of gave in because, shamans are people too, right? So in the case of the young boy, in Australia, he did not know some of his siblings because in the world he came from, those siblings had never been born.
Sounds like the TV show Fringe. Do you remember the TV show Fringe?
I make it a point not to watch these shows.
Okay.
Because I don't want people to say it's been suggested, because I've been talking about this stuff for 30 years myself. So.
Okay, let me just tell you very quickly what happens here is one of the lead characters, who is the son of this crazy guy. And it turns out that he's not the original. The original died. And his dad was so distraught he went into another universe and kidnapped the counterpart.
Seriously?
That's how on the TV show. It was a J.J. Abrams TV show called Fringe, and it was on several years ago. And John Noble was the crazy father. Of course, he's kind of a wacky guy. He's an actor from Australia. And that was one of the main plot points, that there was a second universe, a second Earth with somewhat different histories and such, with counterparts to us.
Yeah, I wonder if they read my books.
Well, this was about 10 years ago, I guess, by now.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But these guys actually told me this is what happened again in Quebec and in Australia. The Australian and the guy in Quebec who was brought back literally lost his mind. Yeah, he couldn't handle it. He would walk to work every day past his own grave. So, I mean, how do you deal with that kind of thing? I don't think we're quite up to actually dealing with this sort of thing. So were we to move to a different world consciously, the results might be very bad. I mean, there's a reason for the order of the world families. And I think that we are so frightened. What did H.P. Lovecraft say? He said, the most terrifying thing to the human spirit is a disruption in time and space. When we stay in the order of the world families, we move through them in an area that to us, to our consciousness, seems we're moving from past to future. It's orderly, it's predictable. The sun comes up in the east, not the west, every day, and that gives us security and keeps us from losing it. Whereas if we deliberately disrupt the flow of the world families, or when we experience paranormal phenomena through no fault of our own, although really it is in a way, it's another story, we have trouble handling it. It's like PTSD on steroids sometimes.
We've got more to come with Paul Eno. Everything you know is wrong. Fascinating stuff with Gina and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. I'm here to tell you about GCNtelecare.com, a team of board-certified doctors assisting you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Within 15 minutes of registration, care your family can afford. Revolutionizing the healthcare industry, virtual consulting providing diagnosis of non-emergency medical issues by phone or secure video on computer or smart mobile devices. GCNtelecare.com, virtual care anywhere.
Are you living your passion? Are you pumped to go to work because you get to talk about or work with or do the things that interest you the most? Is working, playing, and relaxing one and the same? As long as you're working for someone else, you'll never be living entirely true to yourself and your passion. I'm Pharmacist Keith. Let me show you how you can work around your current schedule, create the extra income so you can live your passion. Visit radio.recordedvideo.com. That's radio.recordedvideo.com. radio.recordedvideo.com.
Hi there, I'm Bob Eubanks. You know, as part of Hollywood for a long time, I've seen my fair share of celebrities get in trouble with the IRS. Well, there's one name I trust, the Tax Defense Group. They're the most trusted name in tax. So if you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS, you really need to call my friends at the Tax Defense Group. Ignoring the IRS is not the solution. They can garnish your paycheck, levy your bank accounts, seize your home or business. But the Tax Defense Group could put a stop to all of that and tailor a program that would reduce your tax debt to pennies on the dollar. You gotta love that. So don't just take my word for it. Call them. Find out for yourself. They offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. And they're open 24 hours a day because they know that tax debt doesn't sleep either.
Call now for your
your free and confidential tax analysis from the most trusted name in tax. Call 800-361-6907. 800-361-6907.
Hey, diabetics. Yeah, you. Got a spare hour to waste going to the pharmacy to get your insulin or other meds and supplies every month? I didn't think so. Me either. I've got life going on, which is why I use PillPack. PillPack is an amazing online pharmacy. They package up all my diabetic meds and testing supplies into daily doses and send it to me every month, automatically. All I do is pay my normal copay. PillPack does the rest. I'm serious. This is a free service. They don't even charge for shipping. PillPack handles all the medical insurance stuff and even get with my doctors for my other prescriptions so I don't have to, which is good because that's the stuff I forget. But PillPack remembers everything. They even package up my daily vitamins so I remember to take them too. If you're diabetic, your meds and supplies are life and death, which means you need PillPack. Call right now for this free service. You may even qualify for $25 in free vitamins. 800-560-7310. That's 800-560-7310. Again, 800-560-7310.
Warning, if you're drowning in debt you can't afford, do not let the credit card companies trick you into thinking that you have to pay it all back, because you don't. What the credit card companies don't want you to know is that there's actually a way to get debt-free without paying off your entire debt or going bankrupt. If you have $5,000 or more in credit card debt, you now have the right to settle that debt for a fraction of what you owe. For free information, call Credit Associates now. 1-800-958-9659. We'll even show you how much money you could save. If you can't afford to pay off all your debt, do not let the credit card companies trick you into thinking that you have to. Call Credit Associates now for free information on how to get debt-free faster than you ever thought possible without debt consolidation or bankruptcy. We depend on your success and offer a guarantee, so there's no risk. For free information, call now. 1-800-958-9659. That's 1-800-958-9659. 1-800-958-9659.
This is Robert Hastings, author of UFOs and Nukes, and you're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Chris is now navigating from reality to reality. We don't know if we've got the guy from Earth 1 or Earth 38, right? I want to tell you that we have something here which is part of our reality. It's a second radio show called After the Paracast. And the way to hear that show is to join the Paracast Plus at plus.theparacast.com. That's plus.theparacast.com. We give you After the Paracast. We have other special content there, some videos, and the commercial-free version of this show. So the people who post comments on YouTube and iTunes and say, oh, they got too many commercials, well, we give you the alternative. Just cost you a little bit every month to get it. We have Paul Eno. Everything you know is wrong. And we're talking about, shall we say, the multiverse, alternate realities. So there was a theory that was voiced on this show and by a blogger named Red Pill Junkie, suggesting, and you've heard this possibly before, that there is a relationship between near-death experiences and UFO abductions. So are both seeing something happening in another universe?
Well, that's entirely possible. I'm thinking of a third phenomenon that is not well known, and I think we're the only ones talking about it, but we call it the flashing nexus. And the nexus being the perhaps our core consciousness where all our lives perhaps meet, or where the consciousnesses are exchanged, this sort of thing. And the flashing comes from a report. Now, this started in the 70s, and there was a man on an operating table who later came to me and said that he had had experiences that had just, he had no name for. He's on the operating table. All of a sudden, he was the doctor. And he kind of joked that it's a good thing he had all the man's imagination, memory, knowledge, because he was operating on himself. All of a sudden, he was the nurse. Then he was someone in the hallway, and then he was someone driving by in a car outside. And for a few seconds, he had the entire consciousness, he said, of all these different people, but flashing in a sense of one to the other. Later on, when this whole idea of the multiverse and, shared lives come up in versions of ourselves, I wondered, he's probably experiencing where he is these people in different parallel worlds. Okay, one by one and very quickly. We've had other reports of, not a lot, but other reports of that happening over the years. People who are not necessarily in physical trauma. They're sometimes just going through their normal day, and all of a sudden their consciousness shifts. Yeah, experiences of parallel lives one by one. And again, this can be a problem from the viewpoint of normality in our society. Normality is not only highly overrated, it's highly relative. Because I've seen people who have the dissociative identity syndrome, the multiple personalities, as they say, and sometimes they speak in different voices, and they're and I think that it may be literally true, that they may be experiencing real lives that they're living, and hence even the different voices. And various intersect points between these lives. I think that space-time is like Swiss cheese. I think that it's very common to have overlaps and intersects and combinations of lives, things of this kind. And maybe that's how helps form our personalities, various aspects of ourselves from various worlds. I think it is a great interactive unity.
What about dreams? When we have dreams that seem more than passing in terms of reality, are we then participating in someone else's lives or witnessing it?
Well, someone else's lives, somewhere or someone, are our lives. Literally. The dreams are fascinating, of course, to everyone. When I was I'm a journalist by profession, and I was an editor at the Providence Journal, the Metro Daily here in Rhode Island. You put out the morning paper the night before, so I was a night news editor there. And then I would get up early with Ben and his older brother to take them to the school bus in the morning because my wife worked 9 to 5. And, you do what you have to do. But as a result, my sleep schedule was very broken up. I would sleep in the afternoon to make up for like a couple of hours that I would lose by coming home at 1 or 2 in the morning and getting, you know what I'm saying. So as a result, I remembered more dreams than a lot of people might, and I would always write them down. I would visit certain places in these dreams, sometimes with my wife, sometimes with someone I didn't know, and I would have life memories of these places. I would know people there. For example, nothing spectacular about this, but there was a little cafe on a street corner somewhere in Pennsylvania. And in that particular life, we, I guess, lived there or near there. We knew people on the street. And I would live like whole parts of days in these dreams. A lot of times I wouldn't remember everything, but and then there would be a certain amount of precognitive things because whatever your deja vu you're having, it has already occurred and is occurring in some parallel life or another, hence the idea that you've been there before. And I think dreams are real connections with the parallel lives we're living. Others may not make any sense. Whole books have been written about the symbolism of dreams, things of this kind. And but I don't know. I think that many of them, all of them, or most of them may be experiences of parallel lives that we're living, parallel realities, and in real worlds where we have a life.
Well, I have a recurring dream where I live in this apartment complex, which is kind of sort of like a place I lived at back in the 1970s in Little Neck, New York, but not the same because it had a very unusual parking area in multiple parts. And that's what was different because in the place I actually lived, it was a single parking area for every resident. And so I have that recurring dream, and I wonder, it seems pretty realistic at the time. And I seem to have different cars than I had here, which is another aspect of it. I don't remember much of anything else.
Yeah. No, entirely possible, very common. I frequently have dreams of our old house. We had a lovely place in Cumberland, Rhode Island, in the middle of the woods, and lots of animals and rabbits and cats and all that, chickens. And I will have dreams of various versions of it. under various circumstances, different kinds of weather, different kinds of landscape, but it's always a version of that house. And, and we might still be there. Ben was born and we just didn't have the room. So we moved to a bigger house somewhere farther up the river. But I think that these are a normal condition of our lives, a normal condition of our consciousness. And I'll go you one better there, Gene. I always like to speak at colleges because they ask intelligent questions. And at the end, they put us in like an armchair like Santa Claus, and all the students come up and tell us their own stories, their experiences. Well, I was at Mount Ida College near Boston many years ago speaking there, and I got a kick out of it because half the students were studying to be undertakers. I thought that was kind of appropriate. And two freshman girls came up to me at the end, and they said, and I'd been talking about human relationships in the multiverse, and they said, what if, why is it that we saw each other for the first time, never seen each other before, across the crowded room on registration day, and we were sisters from the start. And they'd been terrific friends ever since that day. And I said, well, because probably at some point in the multiverse, you are one another. You are literally each other somewhere, somewhen. They knew precisely what I was talking about. They recognized it, and I find that happens a lot with people. And they went, scurrying away perfectly happy that they had an explanation. So this unity is indiscriminate, it's complete, and it does some strange things to the notion of the individual. As Professor Amit Goswami says, individualism is a mistake. The individual, the sense of self is a sense of self-reference, but that we are part of this greater unity. So take that for what it's worth. I think it's true.
We have Paul Eno joining us, explaining why everything we know is wrong, which we agree with Gene and Chris. We'll have questions from listeners coming up shortly. You're in the Paracast.
You are listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Neighbors, I want to tell you about my favorite graphics app. It's the award-winning Graphic Converter. Graphic Converter is the universal genius for photo editing on your Mac. Join over 1.5 million loyal users for this Swiss Army knife photo editing app. It gives you all you expect from a top-flight image editing app with tons of features, and most important, it's easy to use. It's also far less expensive than that other app that you can only get by subscription. The one I'm talking about. What's more, you can get 20% off with your order right now. So write this down to learn about Graphic Converter. Go to www.lemkesoft.de/Gene. Let me spell that. www.lemkesoft.de/Gene.
Hunters, anglers, campers, and survivalists. Get back to nature. Expand your horizons with the highest quality, most versatile, unique slingshots and sling bows on the market at slingbow.com. Slingbow products are compact and models start from just $17.98. They're perfect for your bug-out bag or storing in your vehicle. Give yourself and your loved ones the excitement and tradition of Slingbow, a new frontier in archery and truly modern twist on this primitive survival tool. Feel the thrill only at slingbow.com.
It's called the Deep State. Barack Obama's most loyal aides still hold office, and they want to stop President Trump. Deep State was first revealed in the runaway New York Times bestseller, Big Agenda. David Horowitz's Big Agenda exposes Obama's government in exile and his shocking plan. Newsmax, Lou Dobbs, and Coulter all say you must read Big Agenda at bookstores everywhere, or check out our free offer. Call 800-NEWSMAX, 800-NEWSMAX, or go to bigagenda411.com. That's bigagenda411.com.
Looking for that edge during those intimate moments? We see many ads for enhancement, but the side effects include death. At GCN Team, we should change the Healthy Body, Brain, and Heart Pack to the Healthy Libido Pack. The brain and heart are not the only organs that require a healthy vascular system. For proper blood flow at the right moment, go to GCNteam.com or call 877-878-4203. That's 877-878-4203. That's 877-878-4203.
Hi, Peter Vaccaro for ParanormalDate.com. Are you looking for love in all the wrong places? Now you have a chance to change that by signing up for free at ParanormalDate.com. This incredible dating site puts people of like minds together. People who are interested in the strange, the unusual, mysteries, ghosts, UFOs, and the afterlife, and so much more. ParanormalDate.com was developed for you, people seeking a viable alternative to the other dating services. You can join for free by going to ParanormalDate.com, and if you decide you like it and want to connect with people, use the code GEORGE for a substantial discount. Mark Rawlings, president of ParanormalDate.com, says so many people hunger to share their experiences about the paranormal, the unexplainable, or the afterlife, and so much more, and this is the source for them to meet and share that common interest. So sign up for free at ParanormalDate.com, ParanormalDate.com, and use the code GEORGE if you decide to connect with someone you like.
Being self-reliant is about being prepared and to do what you need to have your own source of renewable energy. Portable Solar LLC offers the most powerful EMP-hardened solar system on the market that is transportable from place to place, and the best part, it's very affordable. Contact them at portablesolarllc.com or call for details at 972-575-8875. Soul Arc EMP-hardened solar generator energy insurance for your family or business. Call Portable Solar LLC today or go to portablesolarllc.com to check out their patent-pending technology.
Hi, this is Nick Pope. You're listening to the Paracast.
Gene and Chris in the Paracast with Paul Eno. Chris, you want to toss a question or two in right now from our listeners?
Okay, Paul, here's one. I think we discussed it maybe briefly when you were on before back in December 2014, but this one comes from Marduk, who's been a poster at forum.theparacast.com, where you can post your questions for our guests. He's been on since 2008. He's one of our longtime posters.
Chris, we'll let him take a rest cure if he keeps it up. Go ahead.
Let's talk about Connecticut's Skinwalker Ranch. He's quoting you, I think, here. The place seems to be a genuine crossroads of the multiverse. The resident family, which has lived in the house for generations, regularly seems to rub elbows not only with its own ancestors, but with strangers of human and non-human species, all evidently sharing the same physical space, but within their own parallel worlds. The UFO component became evident in 2009, as did a military presence in the area that caused considerable local speculation. To the present day, frequent UFOs and military air traffic are seen in this out-of-the-way rural area. Now, I remember you mentioned this before, but do you want to give us a quick background on the case and then possibly any updates that you might have?
Yeah, sure, Chris. There was we were contacted by the woman who grew up in the house, and this is a 1793 farmhouse in which 6 generations of the same family have lived. I think that's pretty cool. And she herself had lived in the house for 62 years when she contacted us, and said that she had read my 2006 book, Faces at the Window, 2002 book rather, Faces at the Window. I should say Footsteps in the Attic. I can't get my own book straight, which suggests this multiverse idea as an explanation for many paranormal phenomena. Because she said the goofy things that were happening in the house just had no equivalent in anything else she'd read, and that this multiverse thing was probably the best explanation she had. For example, horses galloping up and down the hallway. You couldn't see them, but you could hear them. People would get out of the way. I myself had a couple of horse experiences there, and the legs hanging from the living room ceiling when the family was sitting there, walking as if on a surface that wasn't present in our world. Things that really don't have any names. So these boxy structures kind of dancing by the windows outside, funny little shadows running around the house, and it could go on and on. This was something that we do is we look beyond one particular house or one particular piece of property even, and inevitably you will find to one degree or another that the neighbors are having problems, if you can talk to them. In this case, we were able to, some. And the house right down the road and across the road, Vietnam vet, very rugged kind of guy, not afraid of anything except his house. Neither he nor his wife would be in the house alone at any point because of the weird things that would happen there. That we found that the whole area was experiencing a spike in UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings even. It's been 100 miles from New York City. And what essentially we believed was happening was that when you have multiversal intersects, when you've got different worlds in large numbers intersecting, you're going to have not just ghostly phenomena, you're going to have things that people are interpreted as UFOs, things people interpret as Bigfoot, these other weird creatures that don't have any names, all happening in the same area. The area has, from a central triangle, if you will, of about 5 square miles, it's expanded to about 220 square miles in our research over the years. The military showed up at 2009, and we traced them to a very strange farm about 5 miles, or actually just a few miles from this original house. And there is evidence of underground activity. The barn was torn down, the central barn, a dairy type place. No cows, no farming going on. The 2 silos remained. A huge metal sheet appeared there in 2013 that could only be seen from the air. Brand new buildings, farm buildings have been put up. Nobody sees this happening. And we have, our show has reporters, and we have a network of, for lack of a better term, spies who don't know each other, who feed us information from these different places. And anyway, make a long story short, there's still fluky things going on in the area. There is evidence of public behavioral changes, and part of our gang, one of our gang is a behavioral scientist from New York City, and she kind of is going to be taking a look at some of this. The people began driving on the wrong side of the road in numbers way beyond statistical probability. When that was noticed of course, accidents resulted. When that was noticed in the local press and social media, it stopped.
When did this happen?
This is pretty much 09 and 10. So again, this is your classic flap area. We call it Connecticut Skinwalker Ranch, because we've never been able to get near the one in Utah for some reason. But who needs it when you got one in Connecticut? That's just sort of like
in Litchfield County of all places. I mean, what are the odds?
Oh, exactly. The area has a long history of strange things, but I mean, when you got Bigfoot and all this stuff, and we've seen things ourselves that I never would have believed. And again, we're still working on it. At the southern end of this, you have some negative things. That's where the Sandy Hook school massacre occurred in 2012.
Right.
I'm sorry to say, but that may be connected, maybe not. But there were a lot of strange things going on there. We're working on one now in Pennsylvania, of course, Rendlesham Forest in England, and this is. I think you have to approach an entire area in order to begin to understand the machinations of the various intersects that may be going on there. That's our point of view anyway. But the military always shows up.
Yeah, it's part of my little formula I came up with on how to identify a hotspot area. And one of the main components is the government and military tends to have a presence almost constantly, and is trying to expand that presence, which is
or something that seems like the military, I mean, I'm a veteran, and I had a clearance. It wasn't very high, but I was spying on Cubans and stuff from helicopters and all. But I mean, that was a very long time ago. But there are certain principles in the intelligence community about how things work, and it just, I don't know. Everything's funny about this presence. And maybe the military, it might not be. I don't know.
Well, I have a question here from Han, which talks about your area there in New England. And he's wondering, what kind of creature do you think Bigfoot is? Well, actually, let me go to the second question. We'll go back to that one. Have you heard of a creature a bit like a werewolf or devil dog called a Canuck or a Canuck, Kanuke, or he spells it Canook, that has been reported in New England? I believe I read about this on a website that is no longer online, so the spelling may be wrong. If he recalls correctly, he thinks the report started early on, maybe in the 17th or late 17th or early 18th century. Now, Canuck, that sounds something a little bit more northern and western, but does this ring a bell? Kind of like a Jersey devil dog type thing up there in New England?
Yeah, actually it does. I haven't researched it personally, but we've heard smatterings of reports from northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. As you say, up toward Quebec, and there is some speculation that it may be associated with, some of the Wendigo legends that the natives had, that kind of thing. But the idea of canine cryptids, as they're called, is something we're looking into because we're working on a book. We want to have it out by June on, it's called Behind the Paranormal, Bigfoot, Mothman, and Monsters You Never Heard of. It's aimed more or less at young people. And we're going to be talking probably a little bit about that, and we'll see. We're still trying to get it together, but we haven't got much time. But I have heard of that. New England has a lot of cryptid sightings for a place this size. Rhode Island, for example, which is only 48 miles long and 37 miles wide. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's the standard of measurement for any iceberg encountered by the Coast Guard. And
well, definitely the smallest continental state in the United States.
Political unit, yeah. So, but I know people in the National, because everybody here knows everybody else, in the National Guard who swear they've been close enough to Bigfoot to throw a rock at it in the what's known as the Great Swamp Management Area in southern Rhode Island. And a lot of Rhode Island, western and southern Rhode Island, is very rural. Most of the development is around Providence, Narragansett Bay, and up through the Blackstone Valley. So there are a lot of rural areas and a lot of very strange Bigfoot sighting, including an albino Bigfoot sighting within 10 miles of where I live. A long time ago, but it was, within, the last 30 years. So, again, evidence of, how does a developed area, and we're looking at this in the Western Pennsylvania case, support a population of any large creature, presumably a mammal. And the question is, it either can't or there's nowhere for them to go, hence the idea that they come and go across the boundaries of parallel realities. And very often when the natives, the people you talk to in cryptid research are hunters and the natives, if there are any, because they see everything, especially the hunters, and the natives have all the background, the historical background and tradition. And tradition is something to be listened to.
Let's pursue this in more detail in our next segment with Paul Eno. Behind the Paranormal, everything you know is wrong. With Gene and Chris, you're in the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
We also have swag. We have all these exclusive Paracast things that you can buy. We've got 60 or so different items, and entails t-shirts, sleeves for notebook computers, iPad cases, mouse pads, the Paracast jumbo tote bag, all sorts of t-shirts and jackets and stuff like that for men and women. We have a Paracast aluminum water bottle. All this stuff, you go to store.theparacast.com, store.theparacast.com. What makes it special is that the items are the best quality, great t-shirts, fabrics, and they have our official logo on them. That's what makes them special, in multiple sizes and colors. We even have stuff for children, stuff for women, stuff for men. We have all sorts of sizes, like small up to X large. A lot of good stuff. That's the swag from the Paracast. You go to store.theparacast.com, stop by, and take a shopping tour.
The answer to being in control of your own healthcare is freedom from insurance. Become part of a group of self-pay patients that come together to share in each other's medical expenses. Individual share amounts begin at $107 a month and $347 for families. Choose from 3 health-sharing programs. Holistic treatments may be eligible for sharing. See guidelines. Discount programs available for dental, vision, and pharmacy. Go to libertyoncall.org. That's libertyoncall.org.
Water is the single most important thing your body needs, so you want to be sure it's the best for you and your family. Since 2005, thousands have depended on Berkey purified water. The Berkey Guy provides the lowest priced filtration systems in every size. For incredibly delicious water now and in an emergency, get to GoBerkey.com or call 877-886-3653. 877-886-3653. GoBerkey.com.
Hi, this is Bryce Abel. I'm the producer of Dark Skies, the co-author of AD After Disclosure, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
All right. Chris has now entered Earth 46, and he's trying to explore the multiverse, and he'll give us a report when he gets back.
It's led me on to Johan's next question, which is, what kind of creature do you think Bigfoot is, Paul? Is it a mundane primate? Some sort of, undefined or unacknowledged flesh and blood crypto primate type creature? Or is it something paranormal? Or is it both?
Well, it may be all of those things, Chris. If
at the same time.
Yeah, well, the natives will tell you they're shapeshifters, which can, in their lingo, can also mean they're coming and going from parallel worlds, terms we might use. They might be flesh and blood creatures, but they just come and grow across brains, BRANES, as we've been saying. The best example I can use is what I believe was my own Bigfoot sighting last September. Okay, we were in this Pennsylvania area. I was working with Shane Searway, who was a very feet-on-the-ground investigator and a Blackfoot shaman, a very good combination. You should have him on your show if you haven't already. And I was up the field in my truck looking for strange lights that we had some photographs of from our previous expedition out there several months before. And, people who have paranormal experiences will often comment on how unexpected they are. So I'm expecting lights. And yet off to my right, through the truck window, I saw in a brilliant moonlit night, September 16th, 2016, a huge creature in the moonlight, big. I remember the big hairy legs, two of them moving up and down, the head bowed as if looking for something in the grass. I snapped a picture with my infrared camera through the cold truck window, naturally, heat signature. I got nothing. So I got out, and closest I've ever come to divorce, my wife called at that very moment. And I was a little new to the Bigfoot thing, so I like a dope, I should have shut the phone off and all this. But I believe that I had a sighting of my own. That was corroborated the next night at a neighborhood meeting we had of the people who live in this area. Over 20 people showed up, all with their experiences. Some of them have stuff going on in their houses. All of them have had Bigfoot experiences. The woman who lived over the hill, I saw lights going up into a tree, or like a flashlight, not anything really strange. At the neighborhood meeting, she put her hand up, so that was me. My daughter and I heard something big moving through the field, and we went up to see what it was, because they're used to this stuff. If that's what it appears to be, I was seeing this while they were hearing it. But then it was gone, just gone. People will say they'll sometimes appear right in front of you, disappear, or move, and then they disappear. So, I think we may be dealing with... And they themselves talk about boundaries in this area. They even have some of the people on their property have like a pathway laid out in logs or something and rocks, and say, well, this is where you go to the intersect point, or the portal, as they'll call it. So this has been going on for so long there, and we just got involved last year, and that was my Bigfoot sighting. So I have no doubt it was a flesh and blood creature because it was reflecting light. You could see the fur, but it disappeared almost immediately as soon as I got out of the truck. There's nowhere really could have gone. And then the next day we found physical marks of something large having passed there on two legs, turning around and going back, probably when I heard the theme from Lord of the Rings, which is my ringtone, and down it went. And I think that all of the above may be true as far as what Bigfoot actually is.
So the answer to what is Bigfoot is yes.
Yeah, I think so. Probably all of those things, but I think it is a multiversal creature able to come and go. Otherwise, where do they go? Where do they breed? How can an area like that support such a population? From all the reports that you have, I think they're multiversal creatures. They come and go.
When we're talking about the multiverse and people going from one to the other, are there, do you think, portals around the world where someone can accidentally end up in another reality, either permanent or temporary?
Well, I think they might be on the right track. Actually, in Australia, we had people write to our show, retired couple saying they were seeing dinosaurs out their kitchen window. So, yeah, I think that may be something like the truth. But again, we like to more or less to refer to them as intersect points. Portals, I guess that's as good a term as any. But here's the thing, Gene, they tend to move. One of the ways you can see that is if you go to some of the stone circles in the old world, particularly England, Portugal, France, places of this kind, UK, and you'll see that some of them are still energized and some of them are not. I remember this. I was standing in 1989. I was standing in the Score Hill Stone Circle in Devon, and I looked up, and it was a March, dreary day. I happen to like that kind of weather, but it was austere and kind of chilly. Not the sort of day people would be out recreating, riding horses or whatever. And up by one of the tors They call them tors, the rock outcroppings on the moors out there. There was a line of people, one or two on horseback, others walking, and I'd say probably no more than eighth of a mile away. And they didn't look like they were dressed all that correctly for the time or the season or the year. I turned around to lift my camera to take a picture, and they were gone. Yeah, they could have gone down the slope, I suppose, but not that quickly. So I don't know what that really was. Within the Score Hill Stone Circle, there was still an energy center, and you could not take a picture that was in focus. That's not uncommon. But also, people would report different stones at different times. They'd walk into the circle, there'd be a stone that they hadn't seen before, even local people. And people would report sometimes, they would call them visions of other people and this sort of thing. Maybe something like it happened to me, if that was paranormal. I suspect it was. But other circles are completely dead because the intersect points, or portals, if you will, have moved. And these, because the Earth is a living magnetic system, really, that is constantly changing, and I think that might be why these things move. That's another long answer to a short question, but yeah, I think there are different points here that they can open, they can close, they can move, and again, it's a rather active and interactive system.
Does that explain flying saucers winking in and out?
Yeah, probably. One of the big stories from the Skinwalker Ranch area, as they described it anyway, there's supposed to be scientists, holes would open in the sky and UFOs would come through. Holes would open in the air and creatures they didn't have any names for would come and go and this sort of thing. And that's entirely plausible from a lot of the things that we've seen. It's funny, in the poltergeist cases, particularly this one in Bridgeport in 1974, it felt like there was a hole opening. I couldn't really see, and you could see the gauzy forms of the parasites when they came out of the room or the hole, and it really did feel like that. They were coming and going from the little girl's room, so that might be exactly what we're talking about.
I kind of think it'd be fun to be able to do that. Yeah.
Well,
I think we have a real. We've come to loggerheads. We have a bit of a conundrum here. I think the evidence, as Paul has described, as I have described from my several decades of work out in the field, and as many of our guests here on the Paracast have described, we're talking about systems of, let's put it this way, we have, a system of understanding and knowledge scientifically that does not allow for the kinds of very good, and I think in your case, highly esteemed, personal observations of things that don't conform to your standard scientific model of reality. When we come back, Paul, let's look at what we need to do to establish the validity of these events so that we can somehow convince academia, convince the scientific community that, people, resources, and some sort of motivation is marshaled to allow us to have a better understanding of these principles. And I think we need to get these academics and scientists out in the field. I think the Skinwalker Ranch case, for instance, in Utah, was an example of the woeful inadequacies of the scientific paradigm and their approach to trying to really study these things in the field. And when we come back, I'd love to hear your feelings, your views, your ideas, suggestions on how we can bridge that gap between us and science.
With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Neighbors, I want to tell you about my favorite graphics app. It's the award-winning Graphic Converter. Graphic Converter is the universal genius for photo editing on your Mac. Join over 1.5 million loyal users for this Swiss Army knife photo editing app. It gives you all you expect from a top-flight image editing app with tons of features, and most important, it's easy to use. It's also far less expensive than that other app that you can only get by subscription. You know the one I'm talking about. What's more, you can get 20% off with your order right now. So write this down to learn about Graphic Converter. Go to www.lemkesoft.de/Gene. Let me spell that. www.lemkesoft.de/Gene.
Have you checked your Google search results lately? Search results are usually the first impression that people form of you or your business, so make sure that they create a positive impression with ReputationDefender.com. What the internet says about you can have a big impact on your life and your livelihood, even if it's not true. Fortunately, you can now control how you look online and in online search results with ReputationDefender.com. Call 800-831-0771 now. That's 800-831-0771 for your free reputation analysis. If you have negative material from an ex-employee, upset patient, or former client, newspaper article, legal issue, social media, or other source showing up in your search results, you can combat it with ReputationDefender.com. Our dedicated experts in patented technology can help make your online search results look their best. Call 800-831-0771 to learn more. 800-831-0771. That's 800-831-0771. Or visit ReputationDefender.com.
Be prepared for the next disaster with the Shelter Pod. The Shelter Pod is a large, all-season, heavy-duty, quick-deploy shelter. The Shelter Pod system can be set up in 30 seconds and includes an emergency medical kit, water filter, survival tools, and more. Are you prepared to take care of your family? Do you have everything in one place ready to go? Get it now or enter to win a complete Shelter Pod system at ShelterPod.com. The Shelter Pod at ShelterPod.com. Shelter when you need it most.
Hey, diabetics. Yeah, you. Got a spare hour to waste going to the pharmacy to get your insulin or other meds and supplies every month? I didn't think so. Me either. I've got life going on, which is why I use PillPack. PillPack is an amazing online pharmacy. They package up all my diabetic meds and testing supplies into daily doses and send it to me every month, automatically. All I do is pay my normal copay. PillPack does the rest. I'm serious. This is a free service. They don't even charge for shipping. PillPack handles all the medical insurance stuff and even get with my doctors for my other prescriptions so I don't have to, which is good because that's the stuff I forget. But PillPack remembers everything. They even package up my daily vitamins so I remember to take them too. If you're diabetic, your meds and supplies are life and death, which means you need PillPack. Call right now for this free service. You may even qualify for $25 in free vitamins. 800-560-7310. That's 800-560-7310. Again, 800-560-7310.
We use cell phones against our heads every day. But now, a landmark U.S. government study confirms increased health risks from exposure to EMF radiation emitted from these devices. The time to protect yourself is now. The solution is Defender Shield. Proudly made in the USA, Defender Shield blocks virtually 100% of EMF radiation emitted from cell phones, tablets, and laptops. Buy now at DefenderShield.com. Use discount code DEFENDER for 10% off. DefenderShield.com, the worldwide leader in EMF radiation protection.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
So, Paul Eno, you've been given your marching orders from Chris O'Brien. Okay, so now you have your assignment. If you don't take it, you will self-destruct or end up in Earth 407. Go ahead, please.
I don't have to worry about Medicare. Well, I think, gentlemen, it's a very difficult question. You know, what is the answer to the narrow paradigm? How do we expand it? Well, I'll say it again. I think that the scientific method is important, you know, in the repeatability of scientific experiments and findings and this sort of thing, and the ability to prove theories, et cetera, the disciplined thinking that is required, the peer review, and again, the repeatability to repeat that another time is all very important. However, it may be important, but it's not good enough, just as the old explanations for ghosts, et cetera, I didn't think were good enough. So our science is not good enough for explaining something that is really outside of its purview. There are areas of hope, though. I'm thinking in terms of transpersonal psychology, for example, which is relatively new, but understanding that psychology is not an exact science. It has a sort of grudging respect from the physical sciences. Nevertheless, it is beginning. Transpersonal psychology is beginning to recognize the presence of and the significance of spirituality, say, or non-physical experiences. The idea that consciousness may be non-local, which an idea that it gets from physics. So again, I think of all the sciences, hope may rest for what we're talking about in some of the fringe areas of physics, the physics of consciousness, which is sort of an outgrowth of quantum physics, talking about the non-locality of memory, of knowledge, getting a little bit into the psychology of Dr. Jung.
What you're almost suggesting here when we talk about non-locality of consciousness, it's like we're all hooked into the cloud.
Yeah.
In other words, we're doing that now with our computers, our mobile devices. They are all online and interactive. And we call it the cloud, which is a huge network of servers, and that is their memory. So if what we experience, what we know, our consciousness that makes me, for whatever that's worth, doesn't exist here in this place, or what I assume is this place, but somewhere up in the cloud, some amorphous cloud. And we have a vision of heaven. We say heaven is this place up there that we go after we die. And maybe we're talking about some kind of manifestation of the cloud.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy for what we're talking about. The cloud is very much like the multiverse, I suppose. And look how it has, not the cloud itself, but the entire internet experience has changed human consciousness. I'm told, I don't know if this is accurate, that we as individuals receive more information in one day than many people, say 200 years ago, received in their whole lives. And I don't have any trouble believing that. The cloud, perhaps as an analogy of the collective unconscious, or as the non-locality of this stuff we've been talking about, is perhaps very apt. The multiverse operates on every level, physical, spiritual levels we don't even understand. And this is why it's kind of outside of science. But bolder scientists are approaching new ways to understand reality by means of the multiverse and other concepts. But you can't repeat it necessarily. You can't use the scientific method to prove it. So it's meeting a roadblock from mainstream science. And another problem, I think, with the entire approach of this is that the sciences don't always talk to each other. We have the lady who is part of our crew, the behavioral scientist, who also doubles as the casting producer for our show on the side. She's an old friend of mine. Brilliant person. She has a couple, advanced degrees here and there, but was totally unfamiliar with transpersonal psychology. And this is a behavioral scientist who works with children. And you'd think that would be kind of important, but I'm not denigrating that particular science. But I think in general, scientists very often don't talk to each other. There's not enough interdisciplinary thinking. And that goes back to the idea of Western mind pigeonholing everything and therefore getting an incomplete picture. So I think that's something we have to work on, is talk to each other, exchange knowledge, exchange experiences, You don't even see that among the quote-unquote ghost hunters. They don't talk to each other either. If they do, they're usually fighting.
They kind of, I think, live in these little bubbles, but they're just basically advancing the existing theory, don't you think?
Yes. Yeah, precisely. You put things better than I could, Gene.
Well, okay, I'd like to receive a check, ladies and gentlemen. My check, though, will come from the cloud.
That's right.
They don't do existing checks. They just do ephemeral checks.
Right.
Well, I'm having a hard time with the ghost hunting scenario, and the whole community seems to be, I don't know, sort of falling into a place of cliche and, I don't know, just the predictability. Standing there in front of a haunted house with your arms folded like the big guys in Pawn Stars, with this grim sort of persona.
Shaved heads and all.
Yeah, with shaved heads or lots of tattoos and piercings, which is okay. I have nothing against that. I think people, if they want to decorate their bodies as kids, only to really regret it decades later in life, it's up to them. They'll find out.
Skin is
there are other ways.
Yeah.
But when you meet a guy with a bolt sticking out of his lower lip, and his girlfriend has a nut with a big hole, and they sit there and they try to screw the bolt into the nut, it's just weird. Anyway, I digress.
My response is that's nuts.
Yeah, well,
I see what you did there, Jim.
I would bolt from that kind of relationship.
Bad jokes.
Anyway.
Of course, the reason we're doing this is because, speaking of jokes, we're thinking here about the fact that Don Rickles died, one of the famous insult comedians that I met a couple of times, believe it or not.
Oh.
Well,
he was just such a nice guy, though. Seriously. He was a really nice guy, and that was a shtick. Everybody loved him. That's how he got away with it.
Wow. Oh, my. Well, I'll just have to start brushing off my Don Rickles routines when I start looking at you there, Gino. I'll come up with some zingers. You'll see.
You in which army?
Yeah. Well, anyway, getting back to my point, when it comes to ghost hunting and all this exposure that we're seeing on TV with all these shows, which I never watch. I stopped watching ghost shows, I think the second or third season of Ghost Hunters, before any of the other shows had come out, mainly because I was upset that they stole our way of presenting EVP evidence visually. But I digress. Where do we see this whole weekender ghost hunter, let's go out and see if we can get spooked in the local spooky house, leave the 12-pack outside, I don't know. I just see it as becoming very weekend warrior-ish and ungrounded, and actually doing potentially more harm than good, especially when you're dealing with people in living situations where families, individuals are having problems, having encounters, having experiences, and then have the local weekend warriors come in. Anyway, I want your thoughts on the ghost hunting community when we come back.
Paul Eno's here with Gina and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
Hunters, anglers, campers, and survivalists. Get back to nature. Expand your horizons with the highest quality, most versatile, unique slingshots and sling bows on the market at slingbow.com. Slingbow products are compact and models start from just $17.98. They're perfect for your bug-out bag or storing in your vehicle. Give yourself and your loved ones the excitement and tradition of slingbow, a new frontier in archery and truly modern twist on this primitive survival tool. Feel the thrill only at slingbow.com.
Are you looking to become more self-sufficient? Then you need to have your own energy source. The SolarArc EMP hardened generator is automatic, maintenance-free, and reduces your monthly electric bill. You can also take it off-grid when you go camping. Contact PortableSolarLLC.com or call for details at 972-575-8875 today. Portable Solar LLC gives you everything you need to start using solar energy in less than 1 hour. SolarArc EMP hardened solar generator energy insurance for your family or business. Call Portable Solar LLC today.
Have you checked your Google search results lately? Search results are usually the first impression that people form of you or your business. So make sure that they create a positive impression with ReputationDefender.com. What the internet says about you can have a big impact on your life and your livelihood, even if it's not true. Fortunately, you can now control how you look online and in online search results with ReputationDefender.com. Call 800-831-0771 now. That's 800-831-0771 for your free reputation analysis. If you have negative material from an ex-employee, upset patient, or former client, newspaper article, legal issue, social media, or other source showing up in your search results, you can combat it with ReputationDefender.com. Our dedicated experts in patented technology can help make your online search results look their best. Call 800-831-0771 to learn more. 800-831-0771. That's 800-831-0771. Or visit ReputationDefender.com. Have you racked up more than $10,000 in credit card debt? Are you barely getting by, making minimum payments? You should know the credit card companies are tricking you into thinking there's no way out. Credit card companies would rather you didn't know that there are ways you can become debt-free and you don't have to pay the entire amount you owe. There are debt relief programs that help people like you escape overwhelming credit card debt. National Debt Relief has helped tens of thousands of people just like you reduce more than $500 million of debt. National Debt Relief has helped so many people they're A-plus rated by the Better Business Bureau. You don't have to declare bankruptcy or take out a consolidation loan. You have the right to settle your debt for a mere fraction of what you owe. Reduce a large portion of your debt now. Call National Debt Relief at 800-314-7417. 800-314-7417. That's 800-314-7417.
We all know that Berkey Water Purification Systems are the most trusted name in water filtration. As an authorized Berkey dealer for over 6 years and serving thousands of satisfied customers, the Berkey Guy offers amazing specials for Berkey water filtration systems. The Berkey Light systems include a set of self-sterilizing and recleanable black purification elements that purify water by removing chlorine, pathogenic bacteria, cysts, and parasites to non-detectable levels and remove harmful chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides. Order the Berkey Light system today, complete with 2 black Berkey elements for only $231, and the Berkey Guy will ship your order free of charge. With the purchase of a Berkey Light, the Berkey Guy is also offering a set of fluoride and arsenic filters for only $39.99. That's over 30% off the retail price. Call the Berkey Guy at 1-877-886-3653. That's 1-877-886-3653. Or order online at goberkey.com. That's goberkey.com today.
Hey, this is Marie D. Jones, the author of This Book is from the Future, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Okay, you see the way the word Paracast breaks up. We had somebody on YouTube, I think, in response to this says, you say that 900 times on an episode. That's in Earth 417. Paul Eno, a response to Chris's comments about the ghost hunting cliches.
Well, I'm afraid the phenomenon isn't going anywhere. What was it, 06? I believe I was in Clearwater, Florida at that big wooden hotel. I was speaking against my better judgment at a conference for beginning ghost hunters. Okay.
Beginning ghost hunters?
Beginning ghost hunters.
Is that like Trump University? You pay $30,000 and become a ghost hunter?
Well, nobody paid me anything like that. But
Bump University, Bump in the Night.
Yeah. There were like 200 people there. And somebody said, okay, well, Mr. Eno, if you had one thing to say for advice on this, what would it be? I'd say, don't. You have no idea what you're doing, what you're touching, and what can happen. The whole ghost hunting hobbyist thing, treating it as if it's bird watching or butterfly collecting, is extraordinarily dangerous. Psychologically, certainly spiritually, even physically. I really cringe when, as you mentioned, they have a live-in situation, and they undertake to counsel the people who live in the house, all of whom believe them because maybe they were written up in the local paper, and if it's in print, it must be true. The whole thing is very, very bad, and I'm waiting for the lawsuits. And people very often will contact us and say, oh, I was ghost hunting and I brought something home with me and all this business, because it's not so much. This idea is well put by Shane Searway, the fellow I referred to earlier, the investigator we work with, part of our little group that we consult with. Shane says that it's not places that are haunted, it's people. And I don't know if I go quite that far, but I think that people participate in the paranormal experience. Things, you don't just sit there like a lump and things happen to you. You participate in it. Therefore, you have to participate in remedying the situation should that be necessary. So taking is sort of a sledgehammer technique, like going into a place and doing seances and Ouija boards and all this. It is just has catastrophe written all over it, and it is not a good idea. These people get their expertise, quote unquote, from, quote, having grown up in a haunted house. Okay, many a bio of one of these ghost hunters starts like that. Or they've read a bunch of books by other people that don't know what they're talking about and think that they're experts from that. So I just think it's a bad scene. There are exceptions. There are people with sense out there doing some of this, although I still don't encourage it. And people say, well, you do it. Why should I? Well, I don't know. I got started 47 years ago when I was in the seminary, which may or may not be a valid reason, but I've already been doing it. So I don't know. And it has led us into other areas of the paranormal. But I think it's a bad scene. It's not going to go anywhere. And it's just going to keep creating trouble for the people who do it and the people who are on the receiving end. I just don't think it's a good idea.
I think as long as ghost hunting reality TV shows succeed, that's what you're going to have. And the same thing in the UFO field. As long as you have the same meme that ET is here, let's prove it, let's have disclosure, let's collect sightings in the meantime to evangelize our belief system.
I think you're right. But I'll tell you, fellas, I think that there is a change in the wind. Our book, Behind the Paranormal, came out in November, and the publisher, Schiffer, is telling us that it's selling well, but the standard ghost books are not selling the way they used to. And we're hearing from producers that people are beginning, there's a whole untapped audience of intelligent people who are turned off by the old time ghost paradigm, screaming, running out of houses and trying to talk to them and knock once for yes, twice for no. And
well, you mean the fans of your show and our show?
Yeah, the people. Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to say that, but it's true. So I think that there may be a change coming in the form in which this is presented to live audiences or otherwise. And whether it will be for the better, I don't know. But there does seem to be more of an interest in more depth, authenticity, and intelligence.
Well, as long as you can show the networks there's profit in it.
That's the thing. That's exactly the thing. I could tell you a story, which is really not for public, about the last time we did a pilot and what happened. There were also funny things that happened from, I don't know, other sources, but we'll talk about that some other time.
I wanted to ask you one question because I see it in your bio, and that is you went to 2 seminaries, you graduated, you went to a third, but because of your paranormal work, they gave you your walking papers. What happened?
You might say that, yeah. Well, somebody asked the other day, how come, you graduated one seminary, how come you weren't a day? Well, that's not how it works. I went in at the age of 14 when you could still do that. Fortunately, now you can't. So it was essentially high school and junior college, the first seminary, and I got an associate's degree from that. And then you did the final 2 years of college, which it was part of the major seminary. You majored in philosophy. You had to major in philosophy. And I graduated from that. And then I left the Roman Catholic Church to join the Eastern Orthodox Church. And I happened to be at just the right level to start the graduate theological work I would have started anyway. So I went into their seminary. They didn't like the paranormal work. They didn't like the Warrens at that point either. And I should have had my nose in my books, studying the fathers of the church and other stuff and theology. And out I went in 1977, about a year and a half before ordination. So I was thrown out at the graduate level. So... And the only other thing I knew how to do was write, so I shoehorned my way into journalism by dumb luck, and that's what happened. So that was the story with that.
I was waiting for Chris.
Okay, you asked the question.
You don't want that,
and you answered it.
They never would have allowed me to even apply to any sort of seminary or kind of religious education school. I was already persona non grata.
Oh, really? That's tell me sometime.
Well, when you're in 9th grade and you're in the Jesuit prep school and you're lecturing the history teacher on the first and second councils of Nicaea, and how dare we call this guy who was a carpenter named Emmanuel, Jesus, the Son of God. They didn't take kindly to that.
No, I shouldn't think so. Well, I would ask difficult questions too. Like I'd bring up, Jesus is in the tomb 3 days, and because that's what the prophecy said. Well, Friday afternoon to Sunday morning is not 3 days. It's like a day and a half, right? So I said, well, they must have died on a Wednesday. Not that it makes any difference, but things like that would annoy them. I would ask. I also would have the issue, and this wasn't so much a problem with the Orthodox, who I think are a lot more open-minded, although more historically based. But in the Roman seminary, I'd say, well, all right, Jesus, if he was fully God and fully man, as the theology goes, why wouldn't he have reproduced? Unless there was some physical problem, then normal human being has the desire to reproduce and usually does, and they don't like that because there's a fixation on the cervix in the Western Church.
So how do we know Jesus wasn't gay?
Well, that's true too. That's true too. I suppose I
hung around with a dozen dudes. I mean, come on.
Well, no, actually, there were women in the company, in their group. The Orthodox have a very interesting, and I think they're more historically rooted, a very interesting way to refer to Mary Magdalene, who was not a prostitute. There's nowhere in the gospel where that says she was a prostitute, but the Orthodox refer to her as equal to the apostles, which is that's pretty high praise for the sort of patriarchal era that came out of. So she's an interesting figure, and I think the whole idea of the bloodline and the whole thing, that what's his name in his books, Dan Brown personifies in some of his movies. I think that there's probably something to that. There are very, very old traditions of this mysterious family coming from the Middle East, settling in France, and then there are a number of different sources on it. Yeah, he might have been gay, but if he wasn't, then he probably had a family, like most other people who weren't necessarily gay or whatever. And life always comes through one way or the other. But anyway, these are all things that got me in trouble in the seminary, among other things.
Well, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I made sure that I was I was placed on the do not engage list very early on.
We're going to find out more about that and more with Gene and with Chris and Paul Eno. You're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
We also have swag. We have all these exclusive Paracast things that you can buy. We've got 60 or so different items, and entails t-shirts, sleeves for notebook computers, iPad cases, mouse pads, the Paracast Jumbo tote bag, all sorts of t-shirts and jackets and stuff like that for men and women. We have a Paracast aluminum water bottle. All this stuff, you go to store.theparacast.com, store.theparacast.com. What makes it special is that the items are the best quality, great t-shirts, fabrics, and they have our official logo on them. That's what makes them special, in multiple sizes and colors. We even have stuff for children, stuff for women, stuff for men. We have all sorts of sizes, like small up to X large. A lot of good stuff. That's the swag from the Paracast. You go to store.theparacast.com, stop by, and take a shopping tour.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired? Family Health and Education Resources wants to help you achieve and maintain good health naturally. Overcome lifestyle diseases with nutrition and natural remedies. Addiction recovery designed to build habits that heal rather than hurt. Communication and relationship building to strengthen family units. Character building and devotional resources for the whole family. We are on a mission to save America one family at a time. Visit NewEnglandFHER.com today. NewEnglandFHER.com.
Be prepared for the next disaster with the Shelter Pod. The Shelter Pod is a large, all-season, heavy-duty, quick-deploy shelter. The Shelter Pod system can be set up in 30 seconds and includes an emergency medical kit, water filter, survival tools, and more. Are you prepared to take care of your family? Do you have everything in one place ready to go? Get it now or enter to win a complete Shelter Pod system at ShelterPod.com. The Shelter Pod at ShelterPod.com. Shelter when you need it most.
Being self-reliant is about being prepared and to do what you need to have your own source of renewable energy. Portable Solar LLC offers the most powerful EMP-hardened solar system on the market that is transportable from place to place, and the best part, it's very affordable. Contact them at portablesolarllc.com or call for details at 972-575-8875. Soul Arc EMP-hardened solar generator energy insurance for your family or business. Call Portable Solar LLC today or go to portablesolarllc.com to check out their patent-pending technology.
Today, how to incorporate your business in just 10 minutes so you won't lose everything if you get sued. Step 1, stop putting it off. If you're not incorporated and someone sues your business tomorrow, it's not just your business at risk. You can lose everything: your home, your car, even your life savings. Step 2, call the following number for a free 10-minute incorporation guide from Incorporate.com. 1-800-945-1063. They don't provide legal or financial advice. They just make incorporating quick and easy. So you can incorporate or form an LLC in just 10 minutes. That number again is 1-800-945-1063. Step 3, Congratulate yourself. By taking just 10 minutes to incorporate your business or form an LLC, you protected your home, your car, and your life savings. And that is how you incorporate your business in just 10 minutes. But hurry while they're still giving away these 10-minute incorporation guides for free. Call 1-800-945-1063. That's 1-800-945-1063.
Hi, I am Kelly Cook, the Chief Marketing Officer here at Kmart. Did you know that premature birth is the #1 killer of babies in the United States, or that survivors can face a lifetime of serious health problems? Guess what? You can help. Join me and Kmart for the March for Babies Walk. We'll work together to raise funds for research and programs that help the March of Dimes fight premature birth and birth defects and improve the health of moms and babies. So start your team today at marchforbabies.org.
Hi, this is Bryce Abel. I'm the producer of Dark Skies, the co-author of AD After Disclosure, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
I'm going to just score that. Every time someone does the Paracast, it's 900 times an episode. Remember that. That right. Goes along with the 400 commercials we run.
Oh, but of course.
So, when I add all that up together, there's no time for me and Chris. It's like, hello, goodbye, next week.
Well, we should get Scribner to get an ad on the Paracast for Paul and Ben's book.
We should.
Not Scribner. Yeah, right.
Good luck with that one, right?
Well, getting a publisher to put advertising money into a book is difficult.
Yeah.
And there's not a big budget
you do
there.
Stuff like this, you appear on shows, and we have our own show. They were jumping up and down about that because we can promote it every week.
I have a couple of questions, Paul, that we still haven't asked from our listeners, and this is a good one. This comes from Thomas R. Morrison, who I guess we're trying to get as a guest on the show here in the next few weeks. And he says, I remember hearing Dr. Barry Taft talk about a sharp drop in background radiation readings using a Geiger counter during paranormal activity. I've never heard that.
I have, actually. He said that on our show, Taft.
Yeah, it's always fascinated him. And what kind of instrumentation have you experimented with? And have you noted any strange readings along those lines or any other types of gear?
Well, we don't use a lot of gear. Of course, when I started, it was all very seat of the pants. The most technical equipment we had was a cassette tape recorder and maybe a compass, things of this kind, and two-way radios. But actually, an engineer, a municipal engineer I knew back in the old days when I was editor of the poor little weekly paper in Smithfield, Rhode Island, I told her I was doing this kind of work. And she said, well, try an EMF meter, electromagnetic field meter, because from what you say, the magnetism and even the Earth's magnetic field and various electrical fields and this sort of thing might be relevant. And so I'd been thinking about that. And so I used the old kind with it was non-digital, just had a needle, right? And I was in a house in Uxbridge, Massachusetts, and something was coming down that hallway toward me. That needle dropped to zero. It was as if I turned the thing off. And later on, I think I found out why. When they got digital, these things, I found that when the polarity of on the electrical field is reversed, which is very weird, I suspected there may be an exchange of energy between parallel worlds, maybe with different kinds of polarities, different kinds of physics to some degree. Because when that would happen again, and I had the digital meter, it would go into the negative range. I think in my entire career, I've led one quote-unquote ghost walk, and that was in 2003 in West Virginia at their paranormal conference, and they kind of threw it at me last minute, and I had one of those digital meters, and it went into the negative range, and there was some stuff around us that was going on. Other than that, we really don't use, ion detectors or the compass. Sometimes we'll use that. But a lot of it is just, I like to think, experience and knowing what to look for. And when that polarity is reversed, I think that's an interesting thing. But as far as EVPs, yeah, I suppose Ben has a degree in sound and audio engineering and sound design, so he knows all about white noise in this business. A lot of the EVPs I hear, I question why they are only 2 or 3 words long, maybe, why they are very, very hard to make out very often. And I also question things like people come back from Gettysburg, apparently EVP Central, with somebody who claims to be a Confederate soldier but is speaking in 21st century terms. There are a lot of questions about that. Photography, too. There's no real way to use an instrument, even if it's a camera, to say this is a ghost or this is something. All you can say is this is an anomaly or this is an extra. And I learned photography in the military at you guys' expense, or maybe your parents' expense. There are all sorts of things that can explain many of the things that appear in pictures. Once in a while, you get a real gem. Well, you really can't. But these things can be tools, but they're not to be relied upon entirely because we are in a society that's drunk with technology, and we can't take it at face value.
Well, some things I've found in my limited experience, a number of years running around the country looking into ghost sites and being the cameraman and the sound guy and everything. I think temperature point and shoot laser temperature measuring devices can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also think that that tri-field meters can alert you, at least be almost like an alarm bell. Hey, there's something happening here in the energetic spectrum. Pay attention. I don't see it as an end all to be all. It's almost like an early warning device to me. And,
what do you do for a baseline, though? I mean, the EMF meter can be affected by a radar array at an airport 8 or 10 miles away.
True.
So
it can.
I agree that it can be helpful, but it's also problematic. So I take it with a pillar of salt.
I wouldn't rely on them. I wouldn't let them in any way influence any sort of experience before it's going to happen or during the experience or after when you're analyzing what you've supposedly gone through. Again, I have been involved in some EVP sessions that have been very productive, very fruitful, have had up to 8, 10, even a dozen words that can't be equated to any sort of, AM, FM radio signals or some sort of crosstalk on CB or something like that, because the languaging and what was conveyed did not conform to those scenarios.
Yeah.
There's still room, I think, for some sort of real quality professional work in those areas. But again, I think I agree with you. The human instrument is quite sensitive. And especially if you develop these sensitivities, I think they work just as well. Of course, it's all anecdotal later on. But, I think it's important to have the gear, but not to be overly reliant on it.
Well, that's the thing. And again, what are we trying to prove? I don't think, and this gets back to an earlier question, I don't think we're ever going to prove anything to mainstream science because they don't respect us. They have different standards. And again, I respect their discipline of thinking and the whole idea of how they do things. And nobody in this field seems to work together, at least not very well. And there are exceptions to that, of course. They just are not going to take this seriously. And if there is any scientific progress in this field, it won't be from ghost hunters.
Is there going to be any progress in our lifetime? This is a question to ask with a minute or two left to go with the episode.
Well, we never know. I think that the best thing we can do is to do the best we can, to be open-minded, to be humble. Honesty comes from humility, I think. And we can realize maybe that everything we know so far may be wrong, but we can always learn more.
Paul Eno, tell our listeners, please, if they want to know more about the things that you do, where do they go?
Well, best place you can start, behindtheparanormal.com. That's our radio show. There are over 700 hours of recorded shows and podcasts from CBS Radio and from ON 1240 in Northern Rhode Island. And also the book we've been basing our talk on, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, from Schiffer. It's in most of the stores. But if you get it at Behind the Paranormal, we'll sign it for you. And that's a big thrill, right?
Right. I know that I like to sign the sci-fi books that my son and I wrote, but the problem is here when we want to sign something, he's in Spain, I'm here. So we need the multiverse to get him over here.
Yeah, or you need your son to live 12 miles away like mine does.
That would be fun. I would have to talk to him about that. Yeah. You can find us on Twitter if you look for the Paracast. You can find 2 official, is there any other kind, Paracast fan clubs, a group and a community on Facebook, and someday somebody will tell me what that means. But there you go. Chris O'Brien's site is OurStrangePlanet.com. We haven't mentioned it much, but he's been working like a busy bee in the last few weeks to update the site with lots and lots of new content, iraStrangePlanet.com. We also have a special feature of the Paracast. Great way to support the show. It's called the Paracast Plus. We give you the After the Paracast podcast. We give you the commercial-free version of this show. We offer some show transcripts. More are being promised. A few videos. More are promised. Content from Paul Kimball's Other Side of Truth. And lots more to come. And if you want to know more, go to plus.theparacast.com. That's plus.theparacast.com. We give you simple, relatively simple sign-up instructions. Prices start at just $1.49 a week. A lot less than the Starbucks coffee to subscribe to the Paracast Plus, plus.theparacast.com. Paul Eno, thanks for joining us on the Paracast.
Great pleasure, gentlemen.
The Paracast, featuring Gene Steinberg and Christopher O'Brien, is a copyrighted presentation of Making the Impossible Incorporated. Tune in next week for a new adventure in The Paracast.